So noting we have a quorum here, we'll go ahead and begin the City Council meeting. The date is Monday, October 6, 2025. The time is 6:05 p.m. The first item on our agenda is an ask that a councillor move to adopt our agenda. I'm open to a motion. So moved by Councillor McKnight. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councillor Singh. All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That is unanimous. So we have our agenda. The second item on our agenda is a work session regarding the report from the Tax Fairness Working Group. For folks tuning in online and here in person who are here for public forum, note that public forum is set for a time certain of 6:30 p.m. And so we will turn to public forum at that time. But as mentioned, we're first here on the work session regarding the Tax Fairness Working Group's report. I am glad to be joined by representatives from the city as well as Mayor. I'm not sure if there's anything that you'd like to say first on this item, and then happy to turn it to our guests.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate folks being open to this work session. Tonight it's posted online on the City Council's agenda under this item, a report that is the product of about 6 months of work, diligent work by a combination of community members, city councilors, and our city staff, who took up the charge of a task I gave for folks to look at our municipal taxing system for elements of how we can make it fairer. And of course, hindsight, we probably should have titled it something slightly different around tax policy in general, but the committee really dove into looking at all elements of our municipal taxing structure, how it's different from state level, the education fund. And I largely want to just thank Nancy Stetson, who's here, and Joe Turner, our city attorney, who really led the charge and did a lot of the support for this committee's ability to deliberate, because some folks came with lots of financial and tax policy experience, while others were community members who had a keen interest but didn't necessarily have the depth of experience that a tax wonk would have. And I also would like to appreciate City Councilor Mark Barlow and Councilor Joe Kane, who served from each of the two caucuses here to diligently work alongside these folks. So that was all I really wanted to say, just deep appreciation. This was many hours of work for about a dozen or so folks who worked on this from the community and the city. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Nancy and Joe to walk you through the high level.
Mayor Mulvaney-Stanek, I just zoomed in to get the PowerPoint brought up. So
Sorry, Joe. Could you make sure that the microphone is on?
And just to be clear, Joe is the city assessor, not the city attorney.
Thank you for the clarification.
My acting city attorney just helped me with that. Thank you. I'll phone a friend.
Yes,
Yeah.
I am not an attorney. It looked like I zoomed in, but I was trying to get that set up real quick to get that PowerPoint up. Let me double check. And maybe I need to be a presenter of some sort. Yes. Perfect. Okay, great. Okay, great. So we put a quick presentation just to go through kind of what we covered and kind of where it began, the scope of the project, who was involved, parameters we were working with, and the results. And it was a great process. We had, good results. We had, a really good turnout. So here we go. To start, we wanted to start with the beginning scope and objectives of what we wanted to accomplish. The whole thing was about creating a fair tax system and to come up with some recommendations to say, okay, well, this is what we can do to make this better. We're always trying to improve the process, so in order to do that, we wanted to present something that could potentially make the tax system more fair. One key thing here that we really wanted to do is, of course, make this revenue neutral. We didn't want to create more of a tax burden on anyone for the most part. We wanted to make this revenue neutral. But as you can see, these are our scope and objectives. We want to identify the goals. We wanted to identify the definition of what was fair to begin with. And that's a really good point. So here are the members that participated. And I do want to say a couple things about this group. It was a great mix of residents of Burlington. I so appreciated everybody's involvement in this, and we had really good involvement and participation. It was constructive. The meetings were polite, and I really felt like they kept progressing and moving the ball forward. So I can't thank the members of the public enough for doing this. Okay, the process that we had, it began in January, ran through August. We had about a once-a-month meeting or so, just depending on everybody's schedule, and we tried to accommodate that. We started it at an hour and a half meetings, and then we quickly realized we needed to go more, as you know, one does with these type of things. People get going on it, and they keep going. We started out with kind of a higher level. This is tax. These are tax structures. These are tax policies. And then we went down into some reform, and we modeled it out. Nancy put together some great dashboards for us to see impact of some policy changes and what we wanted to do. And then at the end, we figured in order to get results, we thought we needed to poll, to get actual input. Instead of theory, let's actually see who likes what and how we can move forward with it. So we did poll the participants of this committee to get kind of votes. Now, what we discussed. To start with, we went with an overview of the current tax system. And I wanted to keep this in here just to show how much we actually give to the education fund. It's a lot. You know, a lot of people say, oh, you know, taxes, taxes, taxes. But as you can see with the graph to the right, a lot is given to the education fund, which is out of the municipality's control. And I just wanted to make that clear in a fact. This gives you facts from FY24, because that's what we were dealing with. We raised $141 million total. 65% of that went to the ed fund. Another thing to take from this slide, too, is that the state relief. The state does give municipal tax relief, but only to sub $47,000 income per household. They do give state relief for 115 and under, so there's a gap there, and that gap is something to consider. We actually found that there was somewhat of a disparity there between middle-income people with municipal tax relief. Also of note is Act 76, which passed, which does affect some of this. And there's a lot of, if you have read that act, which is very long, there are some further research needed to get some of these things going, specifically with assessment as well. Okay. Some issues, some property tax system issues that we covered was assessment equity. I mean, we did see, and I don't know if the majority of the council members that are here now didn't participate in the Urban 3 study that did show slight regressivity in the assessment system. When you break the property equity out in deciles, it does show that as a percentage of income, higher value properties do pay more tax.
Sorry, Joe, I think we're being, could you speak directly into the microphone?
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, you and me both. Okay, sorry, I'll speak directly into the mic. So, thank you, Nancy. Anyway, assessment equity is a known issue, and we're aware of it. That was brought to our attention several years ago through a study that we produced from Urban 3. We also wanted to look into state property tax limitations, and what I mentioned before, some of the middle-income people do not see the municipal break that is given on the state side. Also, splinter tax complexities. Right now, we have 18 different rates, as we all are aware of here, and they can be difficult to understand. So we looked at these. Okay, now getting into the recommendations. We had a handful of them, and these are the ones that kind of rose to the top. The homestead exemption, which we'll get into in just a second because this is one of the more important ones, gives a level discount to appraised value of properties of homestead exempt properties. That's also the splinter tax simplification we looked into, which did get some support. Tax rate by classification got support. They all really got support, but a lot of them need further research. Municipal income-based credit and retail rental rebates did need further research, but it did get some support and interest in further research. And here are the two that we'll kind of look into quickly tonight. With the homestead exemption, you essentially remove a set amount off the appraised value. So if your property has an appraised value of $200,000, you will be taxed at $150,000 or $130,000. We set a range of $30,000 to $50,000, and we played within that range, and it does have different results. It did help with the assessment equity. It took what would be somewhat of a regressive model, and it slightly bent it up towards neutral to not. I wouldn't say it really did any type of progressive work, but it did do some help with that. And we looked at all types of values, and we ended up settling on $30,000 to $50,000. This is similar. I know some people recognize this, but this is a similar exemption to what we did with commercial property, or commercial business personal property, not commercial, excuse me. When we put a $45,000 exemption on business personal property years ago, and then we moved that to $75,000. It operates in a similar fashion to that, so there is some precedence for this.
The veterans.
Yeah, correct. Thank you, Nancy. And the veterans as well. We give a $40,000 exemption to disabled vets, and it does help. And I'll show you some numbers. So this is what it kind of looks like. This is for homestead exemptions, right? So we have the classification of homestead and non-homestead. So when you just look squarely at homestead properties, this is what you see. And you see the biggest impact is felt with the sub $200,000 value properties, fair market value properties. And then when you get to over $1 million, it's not so much. But one thing I do want to share is that none of these impacts are huge. They're not massive. We're looking at 1-2%. So it's not a jaw-dropping change. So it's not a heavy impact. When you look at non-homestead properties, you see the impact there. You see that their taxes go up a little bit. Again, even over $1 million, you're looking at $844 a year for an increase for that relief towards the lower income or lower property values of the homestead.
That's the median change.
Median change, thank you, yeah. With the splinter tax simplification, we looked at the splinter taxes and looked at reducing those down to, what you see here, taking the 18 and turning them into approximately 5. And also looking at a potential revenue neutral rate, like a inflation, so right now, and maybe Eric can help me explain some of this too. Right now, some of the, we have a built-in deficit and adding a inflationary factor to potential rates could help us get rid of a structural deficit. So, yeah, I mean, that was a high-level view of it. The majority of what we got out of it is that that homestead exemption would help and was probably the least complicated, most effective path forward for some sort of tax fairness. We can get into complicated systems. And if you study New York's system, it's really complicated. It has different levels of assessment based on different property types. We analyzed that, but we also thought that the complexity of those systems and the staff hours to set these things up, they kind of become not realistic, if that makes sense. So we wanted to find something that was more realistic and kind of move forward with something that we all get our hands on. So we kind of landed there. But as far as that goes, is there any questions associated with this? Oh, Emma, please.
Yes. And Joe, I was just going to ask, I guess, as making up a word here, to the acting city attorney, Eric, to be able to just explain a little bit more on the splinter tax. He spent a lot of time looking at our 18 different splinter taxes and how that contributes to our ongoing structural budget challenges. Just to explain this a little bit more, it's a little bit of a complicated concept, but for us to be able to have a more modern day city that's able to raise the revenue that we need, these are some things worth thinking about. So if Eric, you can explain it just a little bit.
Sure. We have 18 splinter taxes right now, and each of them has their own rules, which adds a pretty high level of complexity to them. And several of them are what we call revenue neutral, which means that every time we do a citywide reassessment, the tax rate actually inflates down so that each property owner is only paying what they were paying before, which on one hand is fair because just because property values go up, let's say 30% or more since maybe double since the past reassessment, it doesn't mean that the city's expenses in that category have gone up by that amount exactly necessarily, or that the property owner has the money to pay that. On the other hand, because those taxes are revenue neutral, there's no accounting for inflation. And so as our costs go up, our revenues in those categories aren't going up, and it creates a structural deficit. And so the thinking is maybe we could collapse down to fewer splinter taxes, number one, have more consistent rules between how they operate, and have them be revenue neutral plus an inflator so that we're building that fairness element in that's already there, but also still accounting for our inflation so we're able to pay our bills and keep the lights on.
And I will just also add that while I also very much appreciate this work, there are a couple of ideas that I think are worth the council considering sooner rather than later. And at your next council meeting, I plan to make that recommendation when I work a little bit more with my team, because both of these top recommendations that the team are highlighting would require charter changes to even begin to think about. And so while thinking about, believe it or not, Town Meeting Day is right around the corner in terms of the deadlines and the processes and the hearings and all of that. So we're trying to really narrow down to something that could be actionable and simple and understandable. And in particular, the homestead exemption piece is one for which other communities also use, and one for which I think is, as we desperately attempt to also make taxes something that the average citizen can really understand. This one, that particular idea, I think, has a lot of merit. So we'll be coming back in another meeting or so to be able to explain and to go a little bit more deeply on that particular item. But we wanted to give you the full report. I do encourage folks to read the full report. There's a lot of really good elements in there that explore a whole number of different scenarios and policies that the city could go back to and consider in the future. And it is going to be a very good resource for a number of years. Again, almost all of it, everything in this report would require a charter change, which is not a fast process, as we all know.
Okay. Would it now be the appropriate time for me to ask if councilors have any questions or feedback?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great. So I will note that it is 6:24, so public forum is set for a time certain of 6:30. I think we'll see where we're at with councilor questions and comments at that time. Councilor Carpenter, did I see you with your hand raised first, and then we'll open the floor to anyone else? Sorry, your microphone's off, Councilor Carpenter.
Sorry. Did you talk about rates or different rates for apartment buildings as opposed to commercial, and then non-homestead, single-family houses. I'm just curious if that, yeah.
We talked about a lot of different
Yeah.
possibilities for reform that weren't included in this presentation. One of them is setting tax rates based on classification. Like we currently have a 120% rate on commercial buildings. So potentially the city could set a different rate for different types of classification. We didn't talk particularly about apartments. One area of focus that the committee discussed was sort of underused residential. So like the state has interest in sort of setting a higher tax rate on second homes, the city could potentially do something similar, looking at properties that are not rentals and not homesteads.
I just encourage us to pursue that. I know we can't do everything all together, but I would be very curious in the analysis of what that looked like. The one other thing I wanted to ask for, and not tonight, but, as you talk about consolidating the splinter taxes, as someone who worked very hard many years ago on the Housing Trust Fund, I just would like to see a deeper analysis of kind of what that all means. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. Does any other councilor want to be recognized? Councilor Grant?
The study that you referred to, having to do with the urban taxation, was this under the prior administration? I'm trying to think that, could you send us a link of that? I mean, if I'm remembering correctly, and Councilor Kane might be able to help me out with this, it really showed some disparities in some of the neighborhoods in the city with regards to the amount being paid by residents of certain economic backgrounds. And I was wondering, was that information looked at and taken into consideration?
Yes, and that was under the previous administration. It was a report through the planning department at that time, where they did look at, one of the pieces of that report was equity and assessment. It was, I don't know, might have been 3 years ago. We do have a link to I have a link to the actual assessment equity report, which I definitely can share, and you can go through it. What they basically broke down is the majority of that report was utility of Burlington's land, basically, how to get more equity out of the actual property itself that we have that was in Burlington. But the equity piece itself for assessment did show a disparity. But what it looked at is it looked at high value, it looked at a vertical equity, which is high value versus low value, and the percentage paid based on that value. But I'd be more than happy to share that link.
Yeah, because if I'm remembering correctly, it showed a very heavy burden for the central district. And that for me was a pretty grave concern, considering that we have so many, we have a lot of students, we have a lot of working class, middle class, barely hanging on to the middle class people. So I just remember finding those numbers to be very stark. And how much did you discuss taxation on businesses, because it's so different from residents?
Business kind of fell into the non-homestead category when we were looking at some of these things, because they are essentially non-residential. We didn't specifically point out businesses per se, but we did address the classification of non-residential, which would have contain the category of businesses.
Okay, but there wasn't anything around the solutions that were presented that look at the contribution of businesses?
I mean, I guess I'd say I think it's a fairly recent change that commercial is taxed at 120% compared to residential. Not recent? It's old? Okay. All right. Not recent. But, so already commercial is, their assessment rates are inflated somewhat. Are you asking whether we
Well,
looked at reducing commercial?
During the assessment, especially like around and after COVID, there was this shift because the value of businesses was looked at differently from the value of residential.
Okay, so during the revaluation, there was certain subcategories of commercial properties that got adjusted due to a COVID effect. When COVID kind of subsided a bit, some of those values did change and go back to the market value that was set at 2021. That's something that the previous assessor set up. And so they should, all the values of businesses now should reflect the value as of April 1st, 2021, without what would be considered a COVID effect, if that makes sense and if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, it might be something I want to go into more detail
Sure.
with you, because I'm really concerned about the fairness of it, because residential properties weren't given that quote-unquote COVID effect while being also affected by it. And the only last thing I would ask is I would be interested in looking at the dashboards that were created, and I'm wondering if that could be sent to council. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Grant. Can I get a sense of how many other councilors would like to speak on this item? Okay, so it is 6:31, so I think we should turn to public forum because that was set for a time certain. Nancy and Joe, are you able to stick around such that we can come back to this? We have, at the moment, 7 speakers signed up for public forum. So thank you for your patience and for the early presentation here. So we will pause for a moment on the work session, which is item 2, and turn to our public forum, which is item number 3. I will just, before we turn to public forum, just note a couple different items here. One is that separate from the council meeting, we have warned a public hearing on this proposed substantial change to our downtown TIF district. So when we get to the deliberative item on the substantial change to the downtown TIF district, a note that while we certainly would be happy to hear from folks right now, we will open the public hearing again later on in this agenda if there's anyone who wants to speak on the proposed substantial change to the downtown TIF district. Another note will be that if you are here on an item that should be before the Local Control Commission, this would be a liquor license application or an outside consumption permit, for example. That meeting is scheduled for a time certain of 7 o'clock. So when we get to 7 o'clock or right around then, we will pause the City Council meeting and turn to our Local Control Commission. And then one other item before we turn to public forum. Mayor, I know that you and I and Councilors Bergman and Barlow spent some time recently together on a collective statement, a joint statement that we put out to the public recently. And I know that you did last week, and I think now would be an appropriate time, based on our discussions, for us to perhaps take a moment to read that out loud, and then we'll turn to public forum.
Great. Thank you very much, President Travers. This is an important statement, and we collectively decided that it would be important to read it into the record. And so we're going to do a read around for those who've ever done training or teaching. And so I'll begin, and then I'll pass it to Councilor Barlow, who will then pass it to Councilor Bergman, and then President Travers will wrap it up at the end. So this is a joint statement by myself as the mayor of Burlington, including my colleagues who are the leaders of this body here as the City Council, including President Travers, and then the Progressive Caucus Chair, Jean Bergman, and the Democratic Caucus Chair, Mark Barlow. And it is a joint statement on the divisive and harmful political rhetoric that we're seeing in our community and in this country. Here in Burlington, we have a long history of speaking out on issues of national and global importance. We should be proud of this history and the many dozens of issues where the voices of Burlingtonians have often led other communities across our state and our country to inspire real and positive change. The First Amendment and the rights of free speech and assembly, which it guarantees, are foundational to our democracy, ensuring that the people, are the ultimate check on government at all levels, the last bastion to prevent our country from descending into the darkness of authoritarianism. We cannot take these rights for granted, especially right now when nationally there are active efforts underway to silence contrary voices. Nor can we neglect the responsibility that comes with the rights to speak and gather freely.
In recent years, our venues for public debate and political discourse have shifted to digital platforms owned and curated by private companies with a profit motive. And with this shift, we have seen a degradation of our collective standards for engagement and an escalation in divisive and vitriolic rhetoric characterized by harmful personal attacks. This rise has been fueled by algorithms which reinforce echo chambers and create an us versus them environment. We have not been immune to these trends here in Burlington, where harmful, hateful, and sometimes threatening messages are directed toward elected officials, city staff, and community members. These messages have often singled out individuals who hold marginalized identities and create hostile environments for people who serve their communities in elected office.
We have a collective responsibility to engage with one another in constructive and respectful ways. We must counter those who seek to divide us, not with equally harmful personal attacks and divisive language, but by insisting that our public conversation and political debate remain focused on the issues that matter most. Otherwise, our local democracy becomes paralyzed. We cannot do the work of the people, and community members will be discouraged from running for and serving in elective office or putting up their hand for appointed roles in our city government. This is a threat to our democracy.
As elected leaders, we collectively pledge to use respectful and constructive language during our debates, deliberations, and communications, even when there are stark political differences among us, and to discourage ad hominem attacks that impugn the character or motives of colleagues rather than addressing the arguments themselves. We also pledge to discourage divisive rhetoric among our supporters who engage in similar attacks of people's character or motives. Lastly, we encourage all Burlingtonians to use respectful and constructive language when engaging with neighbors, elected leaders, and city staff. We ask our council colleagues and other Vermont elected leaders to join us in this pledge. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilor Bergman. Thank you, Councilor Barlow, for your work on this important statement, which I think leads us nicely into our public forum, which we will go ahead and open now at 6:37 p.m. As always, we will begin public forum here in City Hall with Burlington residents. We now have 6 Burlington residents signed up for public forum. I see some other folks signing up now, some may have a couple more here. When that is complete, we will then turn online to any Burlington residents online. We would typically then repeat that process here with non-Burlington residents. At the moment, we don't have any non-Burlington residents signed up. We do have 1 non-Burlington resident signed up online. When I call your name, if you're here in City Hall, please come to the table and take a seat here. Make sure the microphone is on. The green light will be illuminated, and please bring it close to your mouth. If you are online, we'll let you know once you've been recognized to speak, and we'll put a 2-minute timer up there. Both here in City Hall and online, folks will have 2 minutes to speak. While we certainly welcome varied opinions on public issues, we ask that when providing comments to please direct them to me as the chair and not to any other individual. It's important for a lot of the reasons that we just discussed in that statement, that City Hall remain a safe place for those who serve, those in attendance, and those watching our meetings. We ask that all comments be free from individualized attacks, hate, harassment, obscenities, or other derogatory language about other people or groups based on any protected characteristic. We also ask that public comments avoid conduct which is unreasonably loud, disruptive, or discourteous. If I interrupt a speaker at any point in time, it will be to ask that folks please proceed in accordance with these rules. If folks continue in violation of these rules, I reserve the right to end public comment for that speaker at that point in time. So with that said, the first Burlington resident, welcome to Burlington, Mr. Wilson, that we have is Bruce Wilson, who will be followed by Scott Lowe. A new Burlington resident, Bruce, I believe.
Well, normally I'm just a quiet person, believe it or not, just not really like, I don't do a lot of speaking or whatever, but I have to speak about what Art's So Wonderful. But anyway, so hello, city councilors. Thank you for supporting Art's So Wonderful, Honorable Mayor. So I'm Bruce Wilson, lived in Vermont since 1989, live in Ward 8, And I'm a Vermont Human Rights Commissioner. I'm a youth service provider. I open up 5 youth centers in every major mall and communities around the state. I open up 2 art galleries. It's not about me, I'm just saying something about me. It's 2 art galleries. And Art So Wonderful was founded and formed in 2003, once I'm the founder, and I'm the director. 70% of the murals in Burlington's are Art So Wonderful. When you look around, you see ASW, you see them everywhere. You see all our murals everywhere. And we have a graffiti abatement program. The graffiti abatement program is like, we don't put murals over anything that don't have graffiti on it. So my studies in 2001, if you put murals over graffiti, they honor it, and so far they do. And so we put murals over them. So that's why they're in the nicest places, because people want to put their graffiti in nice places. All right, so Art So Wonderful, in all electrical boxes, we created Art So Wonderful electrical boxes, 2,000 across Chittenden County. You see all those electrical boxes through our partners and Art So Wonderful. We created that. We have over 50 awards, and we've done hosted over 700 events in Burlington. Basically what I'm trying to say is that we're the professionals, we're the leaders. We're not the leaders, we're in the lead for this work. We've been doing it, for all this time, it's 2003. And we want to continue to be looked at as the leaders. You go down Thorson Way, you go around ASW murals, you will see them everywhere. Nobody put graffiti over our murals. Nobody. You know why? Because they respect our murals. And guess what? So that's what I want people to know. We're professionals. We don't waste thousands of dollars on our murals. We don't waste thousands of dollars for people who don't even know what they did. You know what I'm saying? What to do. You know what I'm saying? So all I'm trying to say is, let's look to the leaders who've doing this work for the city of Burlington for all these years. Let's look to us. I'm sorry for going on.
No, it's okay.
I'm emotional about it.
It's okay.
It bothers
We're just-
All right, thanks.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Our next speaker is Scott Lowe, who will be followed by Brett Yates.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, councilors, for hearing me. First thing I would like to say is, as a future independent candidate for political office here in Burlington, I wholeheartedly agree with your joint statement regarding the rhetoric in political forums. I stand by you 100% on that. I'm going to speak about several items on tonight's agenda. In regard to the Tax Fairness Committee report, not only is there inequity in the property tax assessments, but there's also issues with staff being unknowledgeable as to tax amounts due. A follower of my campaign and resident of Burlington said to me that she received her tax assessment and bill that showed to be erroneous. She went to have it corrected 3 times, and all 3 times that tax assessment and bill were incorrect. What I would like to request in light of this is an audit of the tax assessor's office and its practices in valuating properties. Next, regarding 6.2, I'm actually going to hold off on that for a later date, because I understand the change in the downtown TIF is coming later. Regards to 6.5 resolution for financial disclosure of local elected officials, there are already laws in effect that address financial disclosures of candidates for public office. Vermont Statutes Annotated, Title 17, Chapter 61, Campaign Finance. And Burlington already has rules that require public officials to disclose financial conflicts. So there does not need to be anything new or any changes in that. It's already well established, including the ethics.
Thank you. If you have any further comments, and this is true for everyone, please feel free to email them to the council. I know sometimes 2 minutes goes by quickly. Our next speaker is Brett Yates, who will be followed by Charlie Messing.
Hello. I'm here tonight as the president of Partisan Film Incorporated. We're the new nonprofit movie theater at 230 College Street. Our liquor application is on the agenda, and I'll be around in case you guys have any questions when that comes up. In the meantime, if I can, I'd like to just take a quick moment to invite everyone to learn about what we're doing, if they haven't already, which is creating a venue where Burlingtonians will be able to go to the movies again any day of the week and see first-run films. This is really like a labor of love. We think Burlington is an important place for the arts and for culture, and we thought that it needs a movie theater. Downtown needs a movie theater, and a lot of volunteer hours have gone into this, and it's governed as a consumer cooperative, so there's opportunity for anyone who wants to be involved, both in the democracy of it and on the operations side. It belongs equally to anyone who wants to be a part of it, when I worked at 2 art house movie theaters in other cities, both of them served beer and wine, and it was a important revenue stream for us. It wasn't a place where heavy drinking took place, but it makes it a nice place to go on a date, I think. My wife Michelle is also on the board. She's here on Zoom. We'll be around. Thanks for your consideration. Bye.
Thanks, Brett. And as you probably heard, we're going to be turning to your application around 7 o'clock or so, which is on our local control commission agenda. So, okay, great. Our next speaker is Charlie Messing, who will be followed by Kit Andrews.
Hello. Hello, Ben, and everyone behind you, everyone else. Yes, I'm Charlie Messing. I live 2 blocks from here, and I see the park every day. And I've spoken to many of the people there. Some of them are not unable to speak, you might say. But there are some really good people who just can't find a way out yet. I'm very much in favor of helping us help them, and I feel strongly that we should find a way to have the return of the number 11 bus. People need to go to the hospital. It's one of those things. People need to go to the airport. Also, one of those things. If we want tourism, we want the airport. If we want people with less money to be able to move around the city, we need the bus, and we need the airport, a way to get to the airport. Taxi is something like $40. I'm behind everything Carter has said in a letter, and I have so much to say, and 2 minutes is very short. Of course, the Gettysburg Address was only 2 minutes. But I'd just like to see if we can get the sidewalks fixed. And it'd be great to establish a forum, a regular forum for different generations to meet, for the social media have split us up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charlie. Our next speaker is Kit Andrews, who will be followed by Todd DeLuca.
Good evening. I live in Ward 2. speaking tonight in favor of the Resolution 6.5, financial disclosure for local elected officials. As I understand it, this resolution advocates for candidates for local offices in the city of Burlington to file a financial disclosure form similar to what's been required for years at the state and federal levels, thereby expanding transparency around election campaigns. As campaign finance reform measures go, I think this resolution is a small, very important step. And so I am hoping that this resolution is supported unanimously this evening.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Todd DeLuca, and then our last Burlington resident in City Hall will be Claire Wool.
Hi, Mr. President, City Councilors, Mayor. The school board chairwoman, on behalf of the school board, has written a letter opposing the board's inclusion in tonight's financial transparency resolution. Why? According to the letter, board members don't have the responsibility of statewide offices, and the board is not a political body. I respectfully disagree. The board, being comprised of elected members, just like City Council, is the definition of a political body, and that body has enormous responsibility for a system that educates our precious children and for a tax burden that is around 2/3 of our property taxes. Whether or not you pass tonight's financial disclosure resolution, please recognize the power and impact of elected school board members by not excluding them from financial disclosures. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last Burlington resident here in City Hall will be Claire Wool. We'll then turn online, and the first speaker will be Sharon Busher.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Councilors and Mayor. Just going to read a letter that I sent to Council President Travers. For the record, the Burlington School Board recognizes the importance of transparency in public service. However, this proposed resolution that you'll be voting on tonight, 6.5, requiring all local candidates, including school board candidates, to file financial disclosure forms modeled after those required by state senators, representatives, and statewide candidates, is ill-suited, burdensome, and potentially harmful to the health of a local democracy. Specifically, school board candidates should not be held to the same disclosure standards as candidates for statewide office, given the vastly different scope of authority, compensation, and responsibility. Further, Burlington's unpaid volunteer school board is not a political body. When you vote for school board members, there is no political affiliation on the ballot. It exists to serve Burlington students. Resolutions that intentionally pull the school board into political conversations are contrary to the board's mission and responsibilities. For the above reasons, the Burlington School Board strongly opposes any proposed resolution that conflates the role of responsibilities of local governing bodies with those of statewide offices. And I would like to follow up with the concern I have in the collaborative relationship that we have always had in my 8 years of serving as chair, and to never be contacted by Councilor Newbeiser or anyone on the council regarding such a resolution is very disappointing. Here in the school board, any policy resolution that we ever discuss or comes across, especially for action involving anyone, we contact those individuals and speak to them. And I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now turn to speakers online. As a reminder, in order to sign up to speak in public forum online, you need to sign up at least an hour in advance of our opening public forum. As mentioned, we had 2 speakers signed up, one Burlington resident, one non-Burlington resident. We'll turn now to Sharon Busher, and then we'll turn to the one non-Burlington resident who is Corinne Sita. And Sharon, let me just share my screen here. You should be able to now go ahead, Sharon.
Thank you. Thank you, President Travers. It is a TIF-related statement, but not specific to the item for public hearing. There's been a lot of items talking about discrepancies and underfunding, what should have been paid to the school board, et cetera, from TIF. Why am I referencing that in relation to this? I'm just saying that from a resident watching this and seeing little snippets of information, it makes, and then the auditor suggesting that we needed to do due diligence to the TIF process. It makes me wonder if the state has some criteria of how we need to follow certain guidelines. I know they do, but it feels like with all of the change in Burlington, maybe some expertise is lost. I feel that there would be some benefit from refreshing that to make sure we're all on the same page. I'm losing a little confidence in this whole process, and as you go forward to ask for this change, and legitimately so, on the public hearing item, I just want to make sure that we can track it adequately and accurately. So those are my general comments, to try to wish that the state and the city could come together and go through a process, an educational process where we don't find ourselves always having to respond to a discrepancy. So thank you very much.
Thank you. The last non-Burlington resident we have signed up for public forum, and I will note that we've gone through public forum a little faster than normal, and there's been some folks that have come in while we've been going through this process. If there is anyone else who's come in that wants to participate in public forum, if you could please fill out a form here briefly. But otherwise, the last speaker that we have signed up is Corinne Sita. Corinne, if you could just wait a moment for me to reset the timer, and then you should be able to go ahead.
Can I be heard?
All right, go ahead.
Can I be heard? Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure under your rules I can quote Taylor Swift, because Taylor Swift said that her dick is bigger than the devil's. And I was like, you go, girl, because I feel that. Because I don't know what this free speech announcement, if you're talking about me, say my name. It's a pretty name. It's Corinne Sita. Because I got straight A's at the most prestigious law program at Champlain College with TJ Donovan standing right there. So I don't know what this free speech is about, because I know her. Just like I know all the other people who come against me, and I'm forgiving enough to get into heaven. But on earth, I don't play that game, okay? So if they're talking about me, say my name's pretty if you speak French, because she goes to Canada, Karen. That's my name, not Karen, it's Karen. So I don't know what they're really talking about. So I have free speech, and I use it. And back to my girl, Taylor Swift, because she said if she was the man, she would be the man. She's the first woman in this position, so we want her to be the man, not giving all these rules to protect her because she's the woman. So this is just how the real world works, and I'm in real life, and I miss my Burlington. I miss the Queen City. I miss how girls used to be happy, because the first murder that was committed in Burlington was by a woman. Happy girls in Burlington used to never, ever do anything like that. So we're changing, and obviously for the worse. So some of us come here using our free speech under law and say what's happening. Why is there no bus to a hospital? Why is there no bus to Leahy's airport? Like, we are all flabbergasted, shocked. I'm more courageous because I have a God, because I was falsely imprisoned. Oh, this is what we do to our enemies. They falsely imprison their enemies like me because they found out I was getting 163s on my LSATs. And then they try to falsely arrest me so I can't apply to law school early decision. And then I get to Harvard because God is good to me. So I fear no one. So free speech will prove that under law. Thank you, Mr. President.
Go ahead and close public forum now at 6:59 p.m. I think before turning back to the work session briefly, we had warned the Local Control Commission for 7 o'clock, and Councilor Broderick, when you have a moment as chair of our license committee, I would turn to you for a motion on our Local Control Commission agenda. And just to confirm, I am going to briefly recess the City Council meeting then at 6:59 p.m. and call to order the Local Control Commission at 7 p.m. Commissioner Broderick?
Thank you. I would move to adopt the agenda as noted on Civic Clerk.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Schechter. All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. We have 3 items in our deliberative agenda, and Commissioner Broderick, I'll turn to you on each of them. First on item 2.1.
I would move to approve the 2025-2026 first and third class liquor license applications for Seconda Volta, doing business as Pascolo Ristorante, 83 Church Street, same owner, business entity name and location change with the following conditions, contingent upon fire marshal approval and with all standard conditions.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Schechter. Is there any debate on this item? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Are any opposed? That's unanimous. Commissioner Broderick, item 2.2, please.
I would move to approve the 2025-2026 outside consumption permit application for Seconda Volta LLC, doing business as Pascolo Ristorante, 83 Church Street, same owner, business entity name change and location change with the following condition, fully executed Church Street Marketplace Commission Sidewalk Cafe Agreement.
Thank you. Is there a second to that? Second by Commissioner McKnight. Any discussion on this item? All in favor, then please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That is unanimous. And then item 2.3, please.
I would move to approve the 2025-2026 first-class liquor license application for Partisan Film, Inc., 230 College Street, Unit 13, with the following conditions. All city permits need to be closed out, contingent upon fire marshal approval, and with all standard conditions.
Thank you. Is there a second to that item?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Litwin. Is there any discussion on this item? Commissioner Bergman.
Yes, I just want to note that I am a member of Partisan, the co-op, and given our conflict of interest rules, although I do not think that I am conflicted out because I don't own more than one, I don't know what you call them, shares, and you need a 5% threshold just to remove any appearance of conflict of interest, I will be abstaining, and just hope that everybody will support it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Bergman. Any other discussion on this item? All right. Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That is unanimous among those voting, noting Commissioner Bergman's recusal. Seeing no other business before the Local Control Commission, we will adjourn that meeting at 7:02 p.m. and now resume our regular City Council meeting. And we will resume where we were at item 2, the work session on the Tax Fairness Working Group. And Joe Turner, Nancy Stetson will certainly welcome you back to the table here. I'll have to remind myself here, Councilor Singh, I believe that you wanted the floor, Councilor Barlow as
Yes.
well. Were there any other councilors that at this point wanted the floor on this item? Okay, so we'll go to Councilor Singh and Barlow.
Thanks again for the presentation. I just had a quick question about, revisiting the assessment process, and different assessment levels that you talked about with regards to New York. Did we think that it was too onerous, or I'm just trying to understand a little bit why that road wasn't kind of gone down here?
I wouldn't say that, but it is complicated, and we would have to set up some sort of infrastructure with some data, and it'd be a pretty heavy lift, but not out of the question. We do have properties classified pretty well in our system now, but it would be a little more difficult.
Are you asking in particular around second homes, or just generally?
I think all assessed values. A lot of people that I, happen in my professional life that I deal with from out of state are honestly very confused about property taxes. They're like, well, it's assessed and I'm buying it for this. What's the effect to my property tax bill? So there are a lot of different ways that assessed values are done throughout the United States. And then when I talk about when we reach a threshold of our grand list, with the state, then we have a reappraisal, and, trying to even explain that gets complicated. So that's why I'm wondering whether there's other ways of assessment that we could possibly look at.
Sure, and recently, it's not Act 73 that just passed, but it was Act 68 of 2023. The state did impose a 6-year maximum on reassessment, so that's going to help a lot. Considering Burlington's, I think it was a 12-year gap, and now they're saying 6. So that's definitely going to help equalize a lot of things.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Singh. Councilor Barlow?
And thank you. And thank you both for your work on this. I think you were the glue that sort of kept us on track. We had some wide-ranging discussions in the months that we met, and you kept us grounded in moving forward. I think that the report is an excellent representation of what we discussed and a really good work product for us to move forward with. And I also wanted to say I'm one of the members, and I like the way we did the polling at the end, because I did think we had diversity of opinion on a number of the proposals and recommendations. And I'm one of the members who voted for more community engagement on any of the recommendations that I did not oppose outright. The one thing that I wanted to comment on was that we had a very diverse and engaged group, but we could have benefited, and I think I said this at the end, in having additional perspectives and voices from the business community and from maybe even private housing providers. And that's why I think it's really important as we move forward with any of the proposals that we need more community engagement on these things so that we can make sure that all the stakeholder groups and voices that need to be heard in these discussions on taxation changes are heard. And I also agree, and we talked about splinter taxes, and we talked about how, I think they're worth reviewing, because we had, during budget development last year, we were even having discussions internally about whether or not we had the authority or didn't have the authority to raise certain splinter taxes. And Attorney Raman Krishna's good work and excellent memo that came out of that budget process sort of clarified a lot of those things, but it also was, it illustrated that we do have a lot of complexity in the splinter taxes. But I'll say that, and I've said this again, and I just want to say it for the record and for the public, that I think we need that clarification and simplification when possible, but I don't feel that simplification necessarily makes things fairer. Taxation formulas can be complex because they're trying to achieve some equity and fairness goal, and I would just look to our education tax, which is incredibly Byzantine and complex, as an example of a tax that, even though it's complex, is based in a goal of equity. So I don't think we should be scared of complexity in our tax code, but we should be able to readily understand it. And so I support that. And the last thing I'll say around splinter taxes, there are splinter taxes, like I would say, someone mentioned the Housing Trust Fund, I think Councilor Carpenter, but even the penny for parks tax. These things came out of a need to have a dedicated tax that wasn't subject to changing political priorities and whims. So as we look to simplify, I hope that those things that we look at the history of why these splinter taxes came to be, and make sure we, protect the things we need to protect in that process. So that's all I wanted to say. But thank you, excellent work, and thank you for the presentation. And could you also attach the presentation in addition to the report that is attached to our agenda? Because this isn't.
I think it's on.
Oh, it is now?
Yeah, we got it on today.
Okay, yeah. Got it. Thank you. I have an old version of the meeting up, I guess. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Barlow. Councilor Bergman?
Thank you. Thank you, Joe, for your group's work on this, Sarah, as well. It's very clear to me that affordability is a big issue, not just in New York City, not just in the United States or in the rest of Vermont, but right here in Burlington, Vermont. So I really look forward to the continuing conversation that we're going to have, in a really comprehensive and complex conversation. I see this as a first step, and I'm really looking forward to moving and getting something soon. I really appreciate what the mayor said regarding, I think, the exemption idea, which I think would be something that we could move in this session. The idea of juxtaposing study with action, I think, is wrong. I think we can do both at the same time, and we need to continue to look at the different ways of doing things in a more comprehensive way at the same time as we try to do the easiest things first, or things that will make a difference right now. And they may not make a huge difference for some people, but for others, the document that you provided and that little bit of tax relief is going to be really important. So I look forward, and thank you all for the continued engagement and review of this big issue, which we are long overdue. Somebody mentioned, that, this is, the 120%. I mean, we did that in response to Ronald Reagan and the elimination of revenue sharing. I mean, we're talking a really long time ago, and it is time to look at the new ways that we can do things. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Bergman. Is there any other councilor that wishes to be recognized on this item? Because it's a work session, I can say something. So I just have a couple questions. One is just as we consider related legislative items, I would be curious to learn more about how many residential properties do have homestead declarations here? How many residential properties are non-homestead properties? As we talk about sort of the numbers here of going down 17%, 11%, or whatever it may be, I'd be curious to know, and you may know this already off the top of your head, like with a 30,000 exemption or a 50,000 exemption, how much of a decrease from property tax revenue would that be? Meaning, how much more is having to be made up by with non-homestead properties? And then I think what would also be helpful for me is to understand when we talk about homestead and non-homestead, and I think some of my colleagues have been referencing this, is what kind of properties we are talking about here. One of the concerns that I have, and just curious for your feedback on this, is to the extent non-homestead residential properties include rental properties, if we are increasing the property taxes on rental properties, what concerns did the Tax Fairness Working Group discuss in terms of whether or not that increased property tax could be a pass-through cost to tenants if they're facing additional property tax burden as a result of that?
So we didn't specifically look at that. It was mentioned and we spoke about it, but the focus tended to fall on homestead and non-homestead. And to your numbers, right now, annually, we fall just shy of about 6,000 parcels homestead out of 10,300 taxable or so. So it's greater than half. But within that non-homestead, there are commercial properties. There are, in order to claim homestead, you have to live in the property 50% of the year. So whatever, one day beyond 50%. And you can't rent it and things of that nature. So that is something, but we did talk about it.
I would say when we looked at other jurisdictions, most exemptions like this focused on primary residences. It would be possible to exempt $40,000 off all properties, and it would have a similar effect, except it would, push the tax burden to the higher value properties even more so than it would here. But the exemption could be designed towards any classification of property.
Okay. Thank you. I just think two other things briefly. One is, I know in addition to the work of the Tax Fairness Working Group, and perhaps these were items that you were discussing as well, a number of us have had discussions around other tax-related issues here in the city to try to address some of the structural deficits that we run into in our budget year in and year out. when we look at the education tax system, this, at a state level, they have mechanisms to try to level set some of those structural deficits, like their common level of appraisal system and so on, whereas here in Burlington, we're locked into the same grand list without opportunities to adjust that to inflationary needs, without our going to the voters to ask for general fund tax increases. I know that there's been some discussions about perhaps considering proposals that would try to address some of those structural deficits. So as we move forward with this, I'll be interested to hear how proposals like that potentially intersect with these items, which I think then just leads me to my last point here, which is that I know that a number of these items will potentially require a charter change. We're going to be hearing from the city's lobbyists later on this evening. I have some concern about, for lack of a better term, a log jam of charter changes that Burlington has in Montpelier. We still have 3 items by my count, or 4 if we count just cause eviction. And just cause eviction, police oversight, redistricting measures, yes, no guns and bars. How could I? Don't want to forget that one. And then we do know our Charter Change Committee is looking now as well about potentially enshrining our EIB department, which could be another item that heads to Montpelier. And then in terms of the functioning of our government and the affordability of our city, the items that you're discussing here seem like very high priority numbers, and I just want to make sure that we're being strategic in terms of figuring out how we ensure, if these go through charter and these pass by the voters, this is getting the attention that it deserves in Montpelier. And to that end, whether or not we combine these into one full tax package that we put forward to voters, or whether or not we do them as sort of one-off different items where there's question 1, question 2, question 3, where we have even further items that are, at least in number-wise, ahead of our colleagues in Montpelier. I think there's a potential for overloading our state lawmaker friends and making sure that we prioritize what needs to get done. But those are just my thoughts. I don't know if you have anything further on that, or if any of my colleagues here have anything further, but I greatly appreciate the presentation this evening.
Sure, thank you. And one thing, I mean, there is a little bit of precedence in the fact that Burlington, for the homestead exemption that was proposed, since Burlington has that in charter, that exemption off business personal property in both the 45,000 and the 75,000, that is in charter, so that was passed by legislation at some point, so there's somewhat decent precedence there for a positive move for something like that.
And President Travers, I'll just add on the charter item. We all know that some of the charters that you mentioned predate, that we've been sitting 4 or 5 years in terms of waiting for certain charters to be taken up. It is a chronic issue within the legislature. I think this is a good solidarity moment among all of my council colleagues and myself to be able to figure out how do we really work on that logjam down in Montpelier. And certainly some of our charters are a bit more administrative than others, and I think making the case collectively is part of the charge of this collective group of leaders here to make sure we can get things moving in the State House. So I look forward to that conversation, because I think there's a lot of, frankly, useful conversations on affordability, which has been really prominent in the state level conversations that Burlington could perhaps even be a leader on, that would help a lot of municipalities, and again, making the strategic case is part of our job as leaders here around the table.
Thank you, Mayor. Is there any other councilor that wishes to be recognized on this work session? All right, well, with thanks to you, Joe and Nancy, and thanks to all the members of the Tax Fairness Working Group, including Councilor Barlow and Councilor Kane, among others, we'll look forward to this discussion continuing from here. Thank you. That brings us now to item 4 on the agenda, which is Mayor, General City Affairs. And Mayor, when you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So tonight I have a few updates for you because I was sick last week and I tried to be really brief. Thank you for your patience last week as I zoomed in. So I always usually begin on community safety, and I have a number of updates I want to provide the community and the council. The first is related to our City Circle effort, which is a new piece of our community safety strategy. It is a new effort. Hold on. Just went to sleep. Don't go to sleep. A new effort to be able to provide local accountability for when folks violate our municipal ordinances. This is something the City Council passed through the ordinance process, and now we're at the stage which you approved on your consent agenda. You've approved. Nope, you haven't. You hopefully will approve on your consent agenda after this update. to allow us to stand up a position that's related to pre-charge within the CJC. This position, we've already checked in with the Attorney General's office, allows us to support this city circle process. So what essentially will happen is between the support of this professional as well as a number of volunteers, for which I see some in the room even, who have put their hand up to help us stand up this entity. It's like a restorative practice board, if you will, to allow us to be able to hold to account people who violate these ordinances on a weekly basis. So with your support, we'll be able to post this position and then be able to move this piece of our strategy forward. The CJC will work in partnership with the Burlington Police Department and my office in order to successfully launch this and then be able to assess how it's doing alongside situation table and a number of other pieces we put in place for our community safety strategy. I want to thank everyone who's volunteered already. I think this is a great example. When people say, what else can I do to help the city of Burlington? This is a very tangible one that really helps us get to a different kind of accountability, accountability system that can help take the pressure off of the court system and allow us to have some more reliability, consistency really on accountability. So if you are interested, we of course will welcome more volunteers, and you can reach out to the Community Justice Center. I also want to make note that we now, under Chief Burke's leadership, have an online reporting system for nonviolent, low-level incidences. Think about like car break-ins, those kinds of things. And I want to really emphasize, because this has taken a while, and I know we're trying to rebuild trust with the community, but when you report an incident online, an appropriate one, it is checked. It is checked on the back end by our police department. We did not launch it until we knew with confidence that we could follow up with individuals. I've been engaging with folks at mayor meetups to really hear from folks directly that when you call for help, whether it's calling for help, calling any number of those different entities on that guide that we've produced over the last several months, or report online, you will get a response. You call the drug tip line, you leave information, you want to call back, we will call you back. That is a shift, and I hope that people continue to use our community safety system, because day by day, week by week, we are improving things, and this is yet another one where people can report in a more passive way, but still get the support from the Burlington Police Department on a follow-up and investigation, whatever might be needed. We'll add that to the public safety guide shortly, so that we'll have an updated, it's the colorful block handout that you see a lot in the community. Also, under Chief Burke's leadership, we have worked with our community safety liaisons to get very clear about when they will be the first responders to certain types of incidences. This is how we have a more responsive and effective community safety system, when we utilize all the professionals and we don't send police officers to every single call, that we get very strategic around who is the appropriate professional to respond. So our CSLs now are the first responders when it comes to welfare checks or overdoses or mental health issues or suicide attempts or those kinds of incident calls, because they are the most appropriate folks to be responding. They work in close cooperation with our street outreach team, which really also responds to a lot of the on-the-street calls as well when they are on shift. And this is already working well over the last month since this redeployment, and Clarity Point has been put forward by Chief Burke. We continue to watch and monitor the City Hall Park, because there are displacement issues happening with folks who are no longer in the park. And while it might be diluted, it is being pushed out into blocks in and around the Central District. So that's why at the last meeting, we told Council that this is really an interim report. We have not deeply solved the issues that were very concentrated in the park itself, and are continuing to work with our partners like King Street Youth Center and others, because there is displaced activity now happening in other places. Much like our hotspot strategy that we started over a year ago, we know this is the case when you don't get into the underlying solving of the issue, which brings me to the state in just a minute, but I want to just flag that we're continuing to monitor this, and we'll come back to you with a more complete analysis on how this is really impacting Burlington. IACP is the International Association of Chief of Police. This is the firm we've hired to support us in finding our new permanent chief of police. They are beginning next week to reach out to stakeholders to help us build the candidate profile for our chief of police. This will include council leadership, the school district, through the superintendent, business leaders, faith leaders. We have a whole list of stakeholders. We're hoping to have some intentional conversations to hear from the community what the priorities are. And then all individuals be able to participate in a survey that will be launched this month, which is rather short, but it helps us get really clear on what are the priorities. Is it community policing? Is it community relations? Is it we have a whole series of items. We're also going to make sure that survey, of course, is translated and also used in partnership with our trusted community voices, liaisons, to make sure we're getting into all aspects of our community who may not be easily accessing an English-only survey. So we want to make sure we're doing a wide effort to get all sorts of feedback on our candidate profile. This Thursday is my monthly press briefing on community safety, so if folks are happy to tune in on Town Meeting TV. It will be at 10:30 on Thursday of this week. And finally, on community safety specifically, I just want to acknowledge and appreciate our first responders, both for our Burlington Fire Department and Police Department. We had a couple of incidences this weekend, one in particular which was very concerning, involving an out-of-state individual who was recklessly driving in and around this downtown block or so, despite multiple engagement points with the Burlington Police and even the Fire Department. It was a scary incident, and there was even mistreatment of our staff, which is never acceptable. And we're really working hard to make sure that not only the Burlington Police Department backs up our Fire Department when they're being first responders in incidences, but that we name these incidences and acknowledge that we have a lot to do in terms of changing behaviors and culture and the way that things have been trending to make sure that these are safe working conditions for individuals doing first responder work. And then moving on to the state, so I want to thank many individuals in the community who have not only been working with my office to provide input, meaningful input into getting very specific on how does the state best help Burlington, but there's been a number of individuals who've also met with the governor already as he's been doing fact-finding, as I understand it, around his own understanding of Burlington. And I'm very much looking forward to meeting with the governor soon. We have been able to really identify through a lot of good feedback a very specific list of needs that we've shared this with the council confidentially to get your feedback as well, to get very clear on what do we need in terms of social service support, court system support, housing, support for our youth, especially those at risk, as well as our ongoing chronic issues around drugs and that low-level stuff that continues to plague our city. I'm very hopeful for this meeting coming up with the governor, and we look forward to reporting back soon about the progress for that critical partnership. In terms of climate, I want to give a little update. Burlington Electric Department announced just a few days ago an electric vehicle initiative that we've expanded ever so slightly in order to make sure that there is still something that local Burlingtonians can at least access as it relates to climate and electric vehicles and electrifying their way of transportation. This is because the federal government has abruptly ended any federal EV credits for individuals as of the end of September. So Burlington, this is an adaptation kind of moment where we're trying to make sure that our values and what we can do locally is a little bit more so that especially lower to moderately income people can still access these pieces even when the federal government turns away from much needed climate policy. A quick PSA, if you have free time on your hands, we need crossing guards. So I'm just going to make that little, just not only because our school board chair is here, but we really do, it's run through our Department of Public Works, and I'm just making a PSA because if you have less than an hour in the morning or less than an hour in the afternoon, it could really help in some of our critical safe zones around our schools to provide some extra help. It's great, and it's a great way to meet the kids in your neighborhood and families. A couple more things to note. As folks read in the media last week, we have a few staff transitions happening in my office, and I want to start by just extending deep gratitude to Joe McGee, who is our Communications Director and Deputy Chief of Staff. Joe McGee used to serve on this body as a city councilor and stepped right out of council into the role in the mayor's office. I don't know what expresses more love and dedication to the city than doing those two different roles back to back. Joe is deeply committed to this community. His expertise and help in helping to stand up my administration in these first few months is deeply appreciated. He will be very much missed, and I really appreciate all the long hours and work he's done to make sure this community is updated on the important work we're doing, as well as being a close advisor to me in my first months as mayor. Ingrid Jonas has also decided to depart from our office. Ingrid Jonas was hired about a year ago as my first community safety advisor. It was a campaign promise to help bring that expertise in-house, to look at our system overall, to assess it, to make recommendations, and to start helping me stand up a different approach to community safety. And Ingrid Jonas has done that. In just a year's time, she helped us transition our police leadership, which was sorely needed. She helped us secure a spot with the situation table, which is bringing the risk level down for folks who are high users on our emergency services in our city. She helped us develop, alongside our city attorney's office in CJC, the City Circle entity, which I was just describing earlier, among so many other things, to advise a first-time mayor to make sure that we were finding different solutions that were nuanced, that were cross-department and cross-city, meaning our community partners, to really get to the heart of what our community safety issues have chronically been. She came out of retirement as a former state trooper, and I am, again, incredibly indebted to her service to this city and her great care for making sure Burlington could find its way forward collectively in the issue of community safety. And then finally, Sarah Russell, who I've often said has a harder job than I do as mayor. To end homelessness is her title, a specialist to end homelessness. Sarah Russell has served this city for 3.5 years in this role, so over 2 different administrations. This is a position that we will need to rehire, given the fact that no one has ended homelessness, obviously. But Sarah Russell has provided a gift to this city in terms of her patience and her dedication and her persistence on trying to continue to navigate a problem that has only gotten worse, not because of her dedication and work and tireless work at that, but because we are in the middle of a statewide crisis related to homelessness that's showing up here in the city of Burlington in a disproportionate way. I've appreciated how much she has led with care and heart for those who are, frankly, the most unsafe and the most vulnerable in our city, who are the unhoused, which are hundreds of people in the city of Burlington, summer, spring, winter, fall. So Sarah will be deeply missed. She won't be going far, but I want to really appreciate her work on behalf of the city. We would be in a much different place, and not for the good, if it wasn't for her time and dedication to the city. On Wednesday, we will welcome a new member to my staff, Jen Monroe Zakaris, who will become the new Communications Director and Deputy Chief of Staff. We will welcome and introduce her in a coming City Council meeting, but there will be good, strong overlap between her and Joe, which I'm appreciative of. Today was also Dr. Kelly Perkins' first day as the new permanent REIB Director, the Racial Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Director. She is our 3rd permanent director in this role, and it was a good first day to have her join our leadership team. And soon coming will be a final determination on the Parks Director role. That is a decision I hope to make by the end of the week. Ideally, we are going through the final stages of that. As our 3rd largest department, this is an important leadership role to fill as soon as possible. And then finally, on a positive note, I want to end with just some happy notes of community engagement that have happened here at City Hall, as well as many of you participating. First of all, we were visited by 1st graders from Edmonds Elementary School who marched down Main Street through all the construction and came to City Hall as part of a mapping exercise. They sat on Church Street outside City Hall, and we got to talk about maps and directions and ask me all sorts of questions about City Hall. Our 1st graders are our future. It was a really inspired, wonderful moment, and they sang the entire way they marched down Main Street. It was like the cutest thing in the world. But I really want to appreciate their teachers and making sure that city government is part of the learning process for our young people. Also on Church Street, last weekend, 2 weekends ago, Outright Vermont had its final fire truck pull. It's a massive fundraiser for them every year. They raised over $250,000. It was a record-breaking fundraising event for them. Outright Vermont, of course, is the youth service provider organization for queer youth in this state. They've been here for 40-plus years, an incredibly important organization, especially in these times. And it was the most important, wonderful part was the community really turned out for this particular event, including, of course, our fire truck, which is the one that they pulled. Mission Murals and Youth Build Vermont, I saw many counselors as part of this, worked to put up a community mural right across from Edmonds Elementary and Edmonds Middle School. It was really great to frankly see the pictures of almost every single person around this table helping to do something to build community and to paint over some tagging that has been plaguing that building right across the Memorial Auditorium for many years. I really want to thank that effort by artists and community. It was great to paint alongside one of the Youth Build young people as well. We have 2 new pieces of public art up. The first we did officially, we didn't have a ribbon, but we installed on the corner of St. Paul and Bank Street. I really encourage people to go take a look at it. It's right in front of Burlington Square. It's transforming that block, not only the new buildings that, of course, that stand there, but the art piece called Dance in Place is a really beautiful piece representing a lot of partnership, again, with young people. The artist joked that someone complained that had been tagged already. That was actually part of the art because it is the design and the intentions of the young people, including Burlington's City and Lake Semester, as well as other groups being part of that artist design process. The other one, I don't have the name off the top of my head, but it's right outside of City Hall. It's best seen in the sunlight. It's a beautiful piece that is an archway with lots of flowers put in, I think resin, I think is the glass-like stuff that was made out of. It really lights up our Great Street, Main Street that is slowly, piece by piece, being put into place. And then finally, just to want to give a plug for Spectrum's annual Empty Bowl event tomorrow night, Tuesday, 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. at the UVM Davis Center. This is one of their big fundraisers of the year that, of course, support youth who are homeless and the critical work that they do to provide both housing and workforce development for these young people in our city and in our region. So if you are available, I encourage you to join me there tomorrow night, 5:30 to 7:30. It would be October 7th at the UVM Davis Center. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. That brings us to item 5 on our agenda, which is the consent agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda and take the actions indicated? Thank you, Councilor Bergman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Litwin. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor, then, please say aye.
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 Are any opposed? That is unanimous. So that brings us now to our deliberative agenda. Items 6.1 and 6.2 are both in regards to our downtown TIF district. Because item 6.2 requires a public hearing, we brought both of these items to the deliberative agenda, although it's only 6.2 that requires the public hearing. We'll begin, though, with item 6.1. This item comes to us with the unanimous approval of the Board of Finance. I appreciate Ashley Parker and Joe Turner. Welcome back again. You're being here to introduce the item, and then we'll turn to the council for a motion. Thank you.
All right, good evening, everybody. We are here tonight to follow up on one remaining item, outstanding item from the last downtown TIF state audit of that district. This is the last recommendation from the suite of recommendations. It is a payment to the State Education Fund and is the result of, and Joe could probably describe this in better detail, but of missing parcels that were to be included as part of the original taxable value for the district. And so this is to be paid out of the city's downtown TIF fund. It is not going to impact the general fund, and it does not negatively impact our ability to cover our required debt service or other related costs that we might have. Am I missing anything? Okay, all right. I will let you guys ask any questions if you have any.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any councilors with any questions or comments on this item? Councilor Carpenter.
This is more a comment, and I know you covered it, but just to repeat for the public, as I understand this, we moved some money too fast into our pot, and it really needs to go to the education fund, so it doesn't affect us. And I just think that's an important distinction for folks to understand that it's complicated, and what goes in our pot and what goes in the state pot isn't easy to figure out, and this happened, and we're just moving it back.
That is a good, accurate representation of that. In creating the original tax value, we did miss what was considered 2 parcels because these districts are geographically located, and it's not too uncommon to miss these things when the district is created. Just so happens that one of those parcels was a land parcel for a 15-unit condominium, and that's what hurt the worst. But anyway, you're exactly right. Thank you, Councilor Carpenter, for that explanation.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. Does any other councilor wish to be recognized on this item? Councilor Bergman.
And just to be clear, these, this oversight of which things happened not before even a year ago, right? So when exactly did they happen?
It happened in 2012.
2012. Oh, well before this administration.
Yeah, this
Okay.
audit was from 2012 to FY 2012 to FY 23.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Grant.
Hi. I understand why we use TIF. I don't like it, but I understand. I got a couple of questions. Why did it take so long to resolve this issue? I personally was, actually, I wasn't alone. A lot of people talked about the last audit when it occurred under the previous administration. The state auditor was roundly insulted by our former mayor, and there was strong denial that this money was owed. So I'm just kind of curious as to why it took so long to resolve.
So this audit, actually, the report was released in 2024, January 2024. So it's more recent than our waterfront audit. The reason for the delay in paying, well, really both of them, is the city chose to focus on contesting issues related to each recommendation for the ed fund payment that are based on two very different issues. I believe it was about a month ago where you guys received the request to make the waterfront TIF district ed fund payment. That was more complicated. This one was a little easier, but we were not able to make progress on that issue, which really was the accountability being held solely on the city versus any responsibility on the behalf of the state, either at the tax department or with VEPC. When we submit our OTVs, they get signed off by those two entities as well as us. And so Joe did have multiple conversations to try to discuss that as reason for us to not make this payment, because really the responsibility was on a lot of different bodies who had their hands on this document. But that said, we're here today, and we're just trying to do what's right by TIF rule and state law.
Okay, thank you. And when's the next audit due?
So the downtown TIF will not be audited again for, I can't remember if it's 5 or 10 years at this point, but the waterfront audit is about to start up because the waterfront district had a portion of it expire at the end of 25, and so they will be kicking things off. So it is important for all of these reasons to make sure that we're in good standing with both VEPC and State Auditor's Office for all of our recommendations.
Okay, and my last question is, do we still have, the city still has a consultant to help with these TIF issues, especially the ones brought up during the audit?
We do, and you will see him shortly. That is David White.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Grant. Does any other councilor wish to be recognized on this item? All right, seeing none, Councilor Barlow, could I turn to you for a motion on this matter?
Certainly. I would move to authorize the Chief Administrative Officer to take all such action and to execute all such instruments approved as to form by the City Attorney as may be necessary or convenient to ensure the repayment of the State Education Fund in the total amount of $95,363 from the Downtown TIF Fund, Fund 236, to resolve the underpayment issues noted in the state's Downtown TIF District Audit.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Grant. If there's no further discussion on the item, we'll go ahead to vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you very much. So we turn now to item 6.2, the Downtown TIF Substantial Change Request, Use of Investment Earnings. I know that we have CEDO Director Kara Al-Nasraoui here on that, as well as the aforementioned David White. I think the way that we will do this, Kara, if you could come up, actually, I think the way we'll do this, if it makes sense to you, is if you could present on this, and then I think we will open the public hearing if there's any comments from the public, and then we'll close the public hearing, come back to the council for action on the item. Does that work for you?
Yeah. That's
Okay, great.
great. Thank you.
So when you're situated, I'll turn the floor to you, Kara. Thank you very
Great,
much.
thank you. Kara Al-Nasraoui, CEDO Director. I am joined by David White of White & Burke, who is our TIF consultant. You may remember that I believe it was in June, DPW staff came to you to try and find a resolution to support businesses in our downtown. And you all voted to support a change in our contract with SD Ireland so that Main Street could be opened nights and weekends. The cost of that was $600,000, which was known to you, and it was also explained to this body that we would be using investment income from our TIF bond. So how this works is our residents vote that we can issue a TIF bond, which we did, but sometimes that precedes when construction can start. So those funds from the bond are invested, and these investment returns, there are now enough of them to cover this change. And what is happening tonight, so you approved that already, but tonight what we are discussing is now that we have made that move and we have altered that contract, we have to go back to VEPC and the state for a substantial change. And the process around that is you authorizing CAO Schad and Council President Travers to sign a document that would then lead us to go to VEPC for this substantial change. And it also involves a public hearing, which, as Council President Travers said, will occur as soon as I finish speaking. So for clarity, we are going to Vermont Economic Progress Council, also known as VEPC, to ask to use our bond investment income to pay any IRS rebate that may be due, that the city may be required to pay, to cover the $600,000 change order approved by City Council to mitigate traffic impacts, to provide a $40,000 match for a $200,000 downtown improvement grant, and if further investment income funds are available, we would like to use those to add back some features to the Main Street construction. And if further funds remain from our investment income after that, we would like to use it to pay interest on the bond. Questions?
Great, thank you. I think before turning to the council for questions, I think we will go ahead now, and separately warned on Civic Clerk is the public hearing on this item, which is required before if the council approves it. And you should feel free to stay there. We'll see if there's anyone here in City Hall who's here for the public hearing. If so, thank you for your patience. But as mentioned, we had separately warned the public hearing, which we will go ahead and open now at 7:47 p.m. And my first question will be whether or not there's anyone in City Hall that wishes to make a comment in this public hearing. We'll then turn online to anyone on Zoom. If there's anyone on Zoom who wishes to participate in this public hearing, if you could please use the raise hand function. And I will ask a second time whether or not there's anyone here in City Hall or on Zoom. If so, please use the raise hand function who wishes to participate in this public hearing. All right, seeing none, we will go ahead and close the public hearing at 7:48 p.m. And I'll now open the floor to councilors if they have any questions here now on item 6.2. Does anyone wish to get in the queue? Councilor McKnight.
Thank you. I just have a quick question and a little bit of a statement. First of all, I just want to appreciate your office as well as mostly DPW for opening Main Street again on nights and weekends, and to just use this time also to make a plug for the community to drive on Main Street on nights and weekends. I'm still not over it. It's really fun. And I think every time I drive, usually I'm driving, I guess, east up the hill. You can, if you use your imagination, you can really see you can start to see how amazing it's going to be once we get through it. And it's a hopeful experience, and makes me excited to ride my bike down the bike paths and do all the things, and just a good way to appreciate all the important work the city is doing. So really happy about that. And then just a quick question on, you said you might want to use the funds to add back features to the project. Is that something that we would see more specifics on before it goes to the next step? Because I would just be interested and probably want some, power of approval over maybe what you might have to choose between feature A and feature B. And
Sure.
Will we be able to talk about that? Thank you.
A final answer to that, I would need to defer to my colleagues in DPW, but from what I believe is council did approve the entire plan. Then when inflation hit and we were worried about running over budget, we engineered out some features that we would love to add back in. So that would be things like maybe some extra benches, maybe some extra plantings, things of that sort. So they were part of the original plan, and then they were removed as we had financial pressures.
Thank you, Councilor McKnight. Does any other councilor wish to be recognized on this item? All right. Councilor Barlow, could I turn to you again for a motion on this item?
Certainly. I would move to approve the city's substantial change request to VEPSI for the downtown TIF district, and authorize City Council President Ben Travers and Chief Administrative Officer Catherine Schad to execute the attached formal request letter.
Thank you, Councilor Barlow. Is there a second to that? Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. Any further discussion or feedback on this? All in favor, then please say aye.
Aye.
Are any opposed? That is unanimous. So thank you, Director Al-Nasraoui. Thank you, Mr. White. That brings us now to item 6.3, an update from the city's lobbyists on the 2025 legislative session. I know we're joined here this evening by David Mickenberg. David, thank you and your colleagues very much for your work on behalf of the city this past session. I appreciate your submitting to the council a written report on your work, which has been posted to our agenda and is available to the public on Civic Clerk. If you'd like to provide any sort of presentation on that report, that's great. Otherwise, I greatly appreciate your being here for the council to give you comments or ask questions, both on the last session as well as it's October already, so no doubt you're thinking about the next session already as well.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here, and yes, we'll be happy to answer questions. Just provide a little context to last session. As I'm sure you all know, the focus of the legislature was on three main items: housing, healthcare, and education. And there were major initiatives passed and some not passed in each of those areas, which we can talk about. This upcoming session, we anticipate continued discussions on healthcare, housing, and education. As you know, the education bill that passed requires a great deal of work, including, and I'm not an expert on education policy, thankfully, but including the drawing of districts, which I think will create quite a discussion in Montpelier. And so much more work to be done on that particular item. Also, we do anticipate, although the number hasn't been formally announced, probably a sizable hole in the education fund this coming year. So that'll be something that the legislature will have to deal with. There is some good news out of Washington as part of the reconciliation bill. I don't know if you all are aware, but there was a $50 billion allocation of funds called the Rural Health Transformation Program. 25 billion of that 50 billion will be allocated equally among the states. So Vermont is anticipated to get $100 million this coming year in funds to help support our rural healthcare system. How that money is being used is being determined now, and there's lots of stipulations, but that money is anticipated to come for the next 5 years. So it would be an infusion of potentially $500 million to help support our healthcare system here in Vermont. Just a couple of other items. I'm sure you're also aware, as you were mentioning, the TIF program. Vermont last year passed the CHIP program, which is a similar type program intended to support housing and infrastructure projects associated with it. The funding for that can be, it was allocated $200 million a year for the next 10 years, so $2 billion in potential funding for communities to access through the CHIP program. Currently, they're going through the guidelines of that program, and there's lots of details on that, which we're happy to pass along as well. Continued, another just note in the report around substance use, there was in Act 22, the elimination of the rule, which at least as it had been interpreted and played out, sort of a 14-day limit on residential treatment for substance use disorder. They've changed that in Act 22 to be able to access residential treatment in whatever is medically necessary. So more to come on that, but I think that's a positive development for Burlington and throughout the state. I will mention on emergency housing, the GA program, as we noted in our report, a lot of discussion about the GA program and the continued funding for the GA program. It was funded. There was a lengthy debate around the extension of the amount of time people were able to be in the GA program. The legislature passed through its Budget Adjustment Act, a continuation and extension of the time. The governor vetoed that and ultimately through executive order extended it for certain populations and not for others. We anticipate, and then in addition, H91 was a bill that would address the GA program, hoping to reconfigure it in different ways and support the program. That bill was vetoed by the governor, and the legislature did not override his veto. So anticipate that the GA program and the issues associated with the shelter and the unhoused population around the state will be an ongoing discussion during this upcoming session. There was discussion earlier about Burlington's charter changes. I think there was 5 actually. The one related to notice for tenancy. And as of this time, the only movement that we had last year on any of the charter changes was the passage by the Senate of the charter change banning firearms in places that serve alcohol. There were numerous hearings in the House Government Operations Committee on that charter change. There were also hearings on 2 other charter changes, and we hope and will continue to work to pass all the charter changes that you all have instructed us to pass. As we know, being a Dillon's Rule state where the state has the final say on what goes into charters, it's part of the political process that we always have to face as charters from across the state make its way into Montpelier. So we will continue on that work and feel I think, reasonably positive about certainly a few of them. I think the ability to reestablish the electoral districts, I think, has a good chance of moving, and then we're very hopeful and will continue to work hard on the other charter changes, particularly that around the prohibition of firearms in places that serve alcohol. There was a change, I don't know if there was a variety of changes through the through our miscellaneous judiciary amendment, including the legalization of switchblade knives and variety of both prevention and harm reduction supports that were funded through the opioid settlement funds, which flow through the legislature. They're recommended by the Opioid Settlement Commission and then flow through the legislature. That's the highlights. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, David. Are there any councilors that wish to get in the queue here? Councilor Schechter and then Councilor Bergman.
Hi, thank you so much for these updates. I was wondering if you, what you're able to share, if you can share a bit more about what's happening in the education reform space and if and how that might impact us here in Burlington or what we should be paying attention to going into the next legislative session.
Yeah, that wasn't on our, we were following it, watching it for Burlington, just sort of reporting back on, but weren't deep into the details. It wasn't on the sort of consent priorities, but I think certainly given the discussion that we were having earlier, or that you all were having earlier today, it's of course an important issue. And the frameworks were all passed last year through Act 73, but the details have yet to be worked out. So I'm happy to take any feedback in terms of us working on those issues for you. Yeah.
And Councilor Schechter, I think I do see the mayor perhaps wanting to respond on
I
this
wanted
issue.
to briefly also just mention that, Councilor Schechter, that the school district actually has its own lobbying firm that they've hired, and we try to work in cooperation. When we were meeting down in the building a little bit, we would always invite them in, but that might be something that we can ask Chair Wool to also send an update more directly, as we've asked our team to focus on municipal issues directly. Yeah.
Yeah, we did work very closely with them anytime they needed support from the city, just in sort of a broad sense, we were able to provide some lobbying support for them. Yeah.
Thank you, Councilor Schechter. We'll go to Councilor Bergman and then Councilor McKnight and then Carpenter.
Thank you. Thank you, David. I'm really interested and concerned about our charter changes. I mean, most of them passed with such large majorities that it is really infuriating that they're not even moving. I'm curious about the discussion that took place in the hearing with regard to notice of tenants for prior to termination. And I also want to understand what we might, as counselors in a bipartisan way, could do to advance all of them, including going down to testify. It is quite possible that maybe the president and the two caucus chairs, along with the administration, could present testimony down there to try to move things, to try to lobby, try to, do something to make it really clear how important it is for us and why it's appropriate for the state, knowing that it's a Dillon Rule state, but the fact that things happen here and that we're doing stuff here can improve the lives and the outlook of folks from Bennington to Brattleboro to Newport to St. Albans. So appreciate some insight into that.
Yeah. There was a hearing on that particular charter change. Most of the, to be frank, anytime there's anything having to do with tenants' rights and things like that in the legislature, it's a difficult issue. And the lobbies associated with apartment owners and landlords and whatnot were there in force. And so it was a discussion. It hasn't been ruled out to be, hasn't been voted down. There hasn't been any decision made, but just sort of reading the tea leaves of the room, it it seemed that there were quite a few issues raised by the usual lobbies that work on those issues. So.
And just on the housing-related things, were tenant groups and tenants represented in that room? Folks are mostly working. Those are, sort of paid, the landlords, that's their business, so that they go. It's a little harder for us, but perhaps with a bit of organizing, we could be able to show that there are a lot of normal folks out there that are not being served well by the current system.
I think there was some attempt to find tenants groups to show up, and that wasn't successful. So if there are suggestions, we can certainly pass that along to the committee chair and other members of the committee, and I'm sure they would hear from them.
We should probably have some conversations before the last minute. I mean, everything takes time to organize, but I really don't see in this time, and given the housing crisis, that we could not effectively marshal folks to be there, representatives from all sorts of areas, if we're given enough time to do that. So I'd be happy, and I'm sure that the people across the aisle, as I keep saying, even though there's no aisle there, would join us, since this was Councillor Litwin's proposal, and I think we can make a much better effort and at least shine a light on those folks and those interests that are saying that, somehow tenants have to suffer the kind of status quo that is just unconscionable. Thank you.
And the more we know, the more that the legislature, members of the committee hear from Vermonters, you as representatives of Burlingtonians and people that are affected by the charter changes that you all passed, the more likely they are to take action. So, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Bergman. I have Councillor McKnight, and then Carpenter, and then Broderick, and then Grant.
Great. Thank you for being here and walking us through all that. I'm going to build on a little bit of what Councillor Bergman was saying, but just to start out, I want to express, it felt like a year ago we were sitting here, and I was really proud of us as a body that we came together, and really appreciated the mayor's leadership on, ensuring that we put out our list of priorities very clearly to our delegation from Burlington, and so we had that great moment, and then it was kind of a letdown at the end of the session. We had a big letdown on housing, the education bill. I think the jury is still out on how that's going to go. We didn't make any progress on. We didn't see any of our charter changes move forward. So I guess my big picture question is just, from your perspective as our lobbyist, how are you changing the way that you're going to approach this, if at all, this year, to maybe try new strategies, or do you have things to recommend to us that we can all do? Because, as Councillor Bergman was saying, I think it would be great to get more organized earlier. I participated really heavily in the No Guns and Bars charter change, and I can tell you it was a robust effort, but it was very last minute, and we were all texting each other and figuring out who's going to say what when, and asking people to come, from the restaurant industry, really pretty last minute. And so I think, is that in your scope? Can you help us get organized with that, or do we need to take additional steps? I think it's important to have the discussion about how we can really be more effective beyond relationship building, which I think we all work on as best we can. So just looking for that guidance. Thank you.
Yeah, we did a lot of outreach to, did a bunch of outreach to bars and restaurants in Burlington to try to get, and we were some successful, and frankly, we weren't that successful with many. Had a lot of conversations with folks that we thought would be helpful to have testimony. The owner of T-Rugs did come down. Mike Dunn was able to testify in the Senate. And it was tough getting it through the Senate, frankly. I mean, it's unusual. We did, with the support of the Senate Pro Tem, traditionally charters start in the House and then move to the Senate. In an untraditional way, we were able to get the Senate committee, which is chaired by a Republican, to pass our charter change despite fierce opposition from the gun rights groups, both in and I would encourage you to get a flavor of it if you haven't, to go back and watch the testimony on the floor of the Senate, where senators were saying, well, if this passes, I will never come to Burlington, senators from outside of Burlington. And so yes, we haven't succeeded. This is a 2-year biennium, so we are hopeful that we will succeed ultimately, and would absolutely love your help. And if you have ideas, and maybe we just need to have a sort of a work session in that way, like ideas of folks that are willing to step forward. The more that you all and the more that members of the community are willing to step forward in support of what we're doing on these charter changes or any of the issues that we're working on, the better we are, and the more successful we can be. We were successful in, for instance, securing in a very tenuous moment support funding for the Overdose Prevention Center that was going to potentially not be funded. Ultimately, that was funded. I mean, there's a variety of things, small yet I think significant things that we were able to move forward in the first year of the biennium, but absolutely, the more engagement, the better. The more engagement by the council and everyone in the community on all of these community priorities, the better. And so I'm happy to continue to provide in the coming weeks, not months, in the coming weeks, opportunities in which we can work together on your behalf to help move forward of these issues. I mean, there are, you know, for instance, on the House Government Operations Committee where these charter changes lie, there are two members of the committee are from the city of Burlington, but every other member of the committee is not from the city of Burlington. And they have constituencies that don't always agree with some of the things that the city of Burlington is putting forward in their charter proposals, including the ban on guns in establishments that serve alcohol. So we're trying to work with folks from other communities outside of Burlington to move these agenda items forward. But absolutely, the more we can talk now in advance of the upcoming session, the better. So I'm happy to talk anytime. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Councilor McKnight. And let me say to councilors, I'm sorry that the monitor that we've been using as our timer is not working tonight, but I'm keeping it here. And Councilor McKnight, you kept it right to 5 minutes there, so thank you. We'll go to Councilor Carpenter and then Broderick.
Thanks. I may have missed this, but can you provide an update on, what is it here? H91 and the Hearth Act that got vetoed and where you think that's going?
Yeah, so like as you said, the governor vetoed it. Legislature was very invested in that. There will be, I think, ongoing discussions around the future of the GA program and how we employ funds for shelter. I think it's likely that there will need to be some discussions outside of the legislature among various stakeholders to see where they are and how they can come together or not. A lot of the discussion last year wasn't just the governor's position, the legislature's position, but it was various stakeholder positions. So the shelters had certain positions, not all, but some. You know, the CAP agencies had another position, not all, but some. So I think a lot of that work has to be done or is happening and needs to continue to be done before we get to a place of resolution. I do think there's possibility openings to have discussions between the administration and the legislature to move something forward. Whether it looks exactly like H91, it's not clear at this point.
Thanks. Just one other comment. Some of you may know that the affordable housing providers and the homeless service providers actually have their own lobbyist as well, and being short, and I'm maybe directing this a little bit to the mayor, of staff, that would be also, I think, important for us to follow or have somebody follow. They tend to get into a lot of minutia, not minutia, that's not fair, but, really deep dives, and not everyone's going to want to hear it, but I think it might be a good hookup. And even the issue on the tenant notice that Councilor Bergman was talking about, that would be a good thing for them to take up. But it is a Burlington issue, really, and so I bet it's probably not on their radar screen, and we probably should get it on their radar screen.
I'm going to jump in. I'm just going to jump in.
Yeah,
He's
please.
nodding. So I just want to say that on top of our lobbying team, we, in other channels, especially on H91 in particular, we're indeed engaging a lot of our housing partners, as well as Sarah Russell was serving on the Vermont League of City and Towns, had convened a statewide group to really advise with their legislative priorities, for which I'm a member of that board as well. So we were certainly coordinating as much as possible with CHT and even CCRP and others around a lot of the housing shelter issues. The other piece I was going to say is the Vermont Mayor's Coalition has continuing to grow in our unity, especially since January. So less impactful in this legislative session, but now we really are a pretty cohesive group, and all are consistently talking about this as the top issue. So I imagine next session this will be an even more impactful group. As folks remember, there's 8 mayors in the state of Vermont, and we represent Rutland, Newport, Virgins, Barry, Montpelier. All of these mayors are pretty lockstep on the need for urgent state action on this.
One thing I just was thinking about Councilor Brown-McKnight's comments. It might be helpful actually on some of particularly on these charter changes where there are only a few hearings. We can now send out, the legislature records all of the hearings, and we can send that out and to you all so you can get a sense on the tenants one, or on the electoral districts, or the charter change around firearms in places that serve alcohol. So in addition to our reports, you can see directly and get a sense of some of the conversations, and perhaps that will spur some thoughts on, oh, well, I know this person in this particular place that could actually respond to that. So if that's helpful.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. We'll go to Councilor Broderick.
Thank you. I wanted to first say that I share my colleagues' frustration, and I would also say for myself, at least, and many in the community, anger over the fact that our charter changes, which, as Councilor Bergman said, were many of them pretty overwhelmingly determined by the residents of Burlington, that they are just being backlogged by people who represent folks who don't live here. And I think it's especially disappointing that the President Pro Tem and the Speaker of the House represent Burlington, and we still can't get any of these things moved. So I appreciate your work, and I hope that you will continue to push hard on those, especially just cause eviction. And I had questions about that because it is still on this list. So has it still been on the wall ever since it was first introduced?
Yes.
And it's never gone for any other vote since then?
I mean, I've only worked with you all for the last year, so I'm not aware of what happened prior to this, but
all right.
Last year it was not.
I'll look into that myself then, thank you. But that's good to hear. I would highly desire that that just cause eviction is finally brought back up into the light. So, and then on
Councilor Broderick, I can answer that question briefly if you'd like, around the history of just cause eviction charter.
Sure.
Was that just useful for just history? When it was first passed by voters, I was in the legislature representing Burlington, and it did not only pass the Senate and the House, it came back because the governor vetoed it. So we failed by one vote in order to override the veto at the time. So there was a lot of unity and effort by Burlington's delegation to really advance that, and it was vetoed by the governor. It was not brought back up because the margins were so thin, and they've only gotten more impossible to override vetoes with such a thin vote margin.
Yeah, I will mention on S-131, which is the firearms charter, I believe, it's been a while, but I believe the governor has expressed his unwillingness to allow that to become law. So pressure, yes, on the legislature, on the House in particular now to take it up, get it through committee, get it to the floor and pass it and get it to the governor, and then we all have to work collectively to try to convince the governor to actually either allow it to become law or sign it into law, because it's very unlikely that we could, given the makeup of the legislature right now, override a gubernatorial veto.
Yeah, for sure, and thank you for that context, Mayor. I still do find importance in continuing to have these flow through the system and flow through the news cycle. Like, Burlington's the tip of the spear on so many things, and it's very hard to watch folks who don't live in Burlington be the reason that that these are held up. Massachusetts has home rule. And then, so my last question actually was on H91. Do you have any inclination of like any sort of, I guess you kind of talked about the specific next steps in regards to, like H91 itself, but like, are there any other sort of like, because like we've been talking about with how we want to collaborate with the state on how some type of either statewide or countywide regional approach to sheltering of all types and of all durations. How we need that type of collaboration on all organizational levels. Could you, do you know if there's any talk like specifically around that, because like the wheels of government in Montpelier move slow. I know that firsthand. Like any type, what is like that, are people talking about how we need to take this coordination, not just, as the mayor said, between the cities, but also on other sorts of organizational levels?
Yeah, if I'm understanding your question, yes, people are continually to talk about issues around unhoused individuals, about shelter capacity, around, frankly, corrections capacity. One of the things that has come up recently is that there's been a pretty dramatic increase. There was a Vermont Digger story on this, and I'm sure this will be a topic of conversation, but there's been a dramatic increase of the detainee population in corrections, so the adjudicated population, and there's concern about capacity there. And so all of these issues are at the foremost of conversation. How much can be spent, or how much should be spent on permanent affordable housing, how much should be spent on shelter capacity, how much should be spent on the GA program. A lot of those conversations happen through the appropriations process, but the committees of jurisdiction absolutely will continue those conversations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Broderick. Councilor Grant?
Thank you. Taking the topic that you just spoke on, we're looking at the legislature, this is just an observation, not starting again until January, which we would need at some point, depending on the temperatures, to be able to set up warming shelters. So communities can't even talk about that if we don't have an idea of what's coming from the state. And this is not just a Burlington problem. So going back to my overall concern is we just don't have a strategy. We have Burlington representation, to Council Broderick's point, that is in leadership positions that isn't moving this stuff. And I think we need a deeper dive as to why. Like, what is the strategies? I would love, in the past, I remember there being like a lunch between our state representatives and city council. I would love to see something like that happen again before the start of the next session, because I think we really need to talk in depth, not just the numbers. I mean, the numbers obviously are important because that determines what can move and what can't. But what are the conversations that are being had or not being had, right? I'm stunned to hear that there would be representation that would say, yeah, if this passes, we'll never go to Burlington again. I would have liked to have known that, and I would have liked to have known who said that. Because I think someone who would speak like that, I would be curious as to where they are, because we know that all the issues we're facing are indeed becoming bigger issues for other municipalities, and it's not related to quote-unquote politics. So I think it's important to have that kind of feedback. I would love to see more updates. I really felt like we didn't get enough updates during the session. Not that you have to come to every council meeting, but previously we used to get more written updates. Even if you send out a link and say, hey, this particular conversation might be of interest to you, and then to the point to help get people out to testify at hearings that might help move things. Certainly counselors would be more than willing to help with that if we know and have as much notice as possible. And I think that the issues around tenants' rights continue to be just deeply disturbing to me, because this is a statewide issue. And I think we have to be honest that our problem is we don't have renters well represented in the State House. I don't know if you know the exact numbers, but it'd be interesting to know, out of the representation among our state senators and representatives, how many are landlords or property owners versus how many are actually renters. So there's, I'm sure, a deep lack of empathy there that needs to be discussed as well.
I don't know those numbers. And as far as written reports, we did weekly reports to the mayor's office, and I'm happy to provide those to the council as well. So
that would be great if they could also be forwarded to the council, because I just feel, you know, in agreement with my fellow councilors that it just seemed like we got nothing. You know, the previous session, we got a little bit, especially around some of the laws that, for incidents that were affecting us, card theft, retail theft, et cetera, but we just got nothing. And we can't afford that again. Thank you.
Council Grant, I'll just add that we did do a joint legislative and council breakfast last December with Winooski, but we purposely invited the city council caucus leadership and council president because of the quorum issues, and we're happy to revisit that creatively. It might require a couple of meetings because the quorum issue is a challenge when we invite all of you. So happy to try to problem solve around that this coming fall.
Okay, it'd be interesting to know why that would have been a quorum issue, but previously when we met in Montpelier, it was.
Thank you, Councilor Grant. I don't know that we had a quorum present when we met in Montpelier, but is there any other councilor that wishes to get in the queue on this item? All right. Well, appreciate very much, David, your being here. Perhaps we'll schedule another one of these sessions at one of our December meetings before the legislative session kicks off. Mayor will be in touch with your office about putting that together. But as always, greatly appreciate your efforts for the city.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll turn to item 6.4 now, tobacco license application. Councilor Broderick, again, as chair of our license committee, could I turn to you for a motion on this item?
I move to approve the 2025-2026 tobacco license application for Burlington Asian Market VT 1 Intervale Road.
Thank you. Is there a second to that?
Second?
Thank you, Councilor Schachter. Any discussion on this motion? Go to vote then. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are any opposed? That carries unanimously. So that brings us to the last item on our deliberative agenda, which is item 6.5, resolution financial disclosure for local elected officials. Councilor Newbeezer, I see you on Zoom there. We don't see you on screen yet. I think maybe when you start speaking, you'll pop up on the screen here, but I see you on my computer. As the main sponsor of this resolution, would be happy to give the floor to you if you'd like to provide an introduction to it.
Thank you, Council President. I'd move to refer item 6.5 to the Ordinance Committee of the City Council and ask for the floor back after a second.
Thank you, Councilor Newbeezer. Second by Councilor Bergman. Councilor Newbeezer, I will note that, and perhaps we can try to work on it here in City Hall, you were a little bit quiet there when you made the motion, so if you could get, if possible, a little bit closer to your microphone, that would be great. For the sake of clarity, my understanding is the motion is to refer this item to the Ordinance Committee, and Councilor Newbeezer, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Council President. Is this any better?
That is better. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Council President. This resolution would require that all candidates for mayor, city council, and school board file a simple financial disclosure form, just like candidates for state rep and state office in general already do. And so I want to lay out 6 reasons why I think this makes a whole lot of sense, and I'm hoping that we can refer this to ordinance and continue this discussion there. So first, we already require this, as some folks noted already, from any elected official or candidate running for any state office. There's a slight difference between statewide office and what we ask of them and state senate and state rep, but nonetheless is something that's sort of standard operating procedure. Second, the state legislature recently gave all municipalities broad authority to enact new ethics laws. They understood the need for localities to be able to implement measures like this to increase transparency. Third, the amount of money in local politics on and off election season has grown significantly in the last 10 years. And so just to give a quick snapshot, a number of council campaigns from across the political spectrum raised nearly $30,000 last cycle, not to mention what the political party spent on top of that on local races. Mayoral campaigns are now raising a minimum of $100,000 in order to be competitive. And we now have Burlington-specific interest groups to the point of raising hundreds of thousands of dollars, hiring full-time staff, only to lobby on local issues, both this body and others. These are where we are. These are facts of where we are today. It doesn't mean that anyone's being nefarious, but it does mean that the standard operating procedure for how we create policy and how we elect folks in this community has shifted in the last 5 to 10 years. And I think it's important that we note that and we start to look at our ethics rules and identify gaps and fill those gaps as a preventative measure. Fourth, there's currently no mechanism in place other than sort of self-reporting of city councilors for the public or media to reliably and independently verify potential conflicts. This is not adequate in my view, and I think needs to be strengthened. Fifth, this is easy to implement. When you run for any local office, you have to file a series of paperwork. I think there's 3 or 4 different forms by a certain number of days from election day. This would simply add 1 form to those forms. The Department of Finance and Administration also issued a memo, which is attached to this item, noting that this will be easy to implement and add no additional cost to the taxpayer. And then, like I said earlier, this is preventative. If the federal government has taught us anything recently, is that democracy is fragile. Building and maintaining a culture of transparency in government is something we should be doing all the time. I don't want to wait around for someone to sort of test the checks and balances before we take actions to improve, excuse me, and strengthen them. So I don't find this to be a particularly radical idea. I've heard a few themes on pushback and hope I have just a minute left to address those. I think the main thing I've heard is feedback, interestingly, from elected officials or public servants or political folks versus residents, but has been that this may discourage candidates from running for office. I don't think that's the case. It's no secret that Burlington politics, as noted in the statement earlier, can be overly divisive, unnecessarily divisive at times. And that's been true for, unfortunately, a number of years now. The number one reason when I've tried to recruit dozens and dozens of candidates to run for various offices in all parts of the state, and the number one reason consistently is because we don't compensate elected officials enough. So the only folks running for these positions are either retired or wealthy, or who have a level of flexibility or willing to give a level of flexibility that I would say almost no one in our state has. And so that's really the issue we should address, and we should have a conversation about that. But that's not what we are discussing today. So I will leave it there. I apologize for not being able to be in person. I meant to be, and found out this morning that I have hand, foot, and mouth for my wonderful 1-year-old. So I'm home today and tomorrow as we're cleaning that up. But look forward to the discussion and hope that the council can support this resolution. Thank you.
Point of order.
Yep.
I just want to clarify, and perhaps the maker would just clarify that what you're moving is the amended version, which is noted on Civic Clerk, and that's the version that on line 28 does not have the reference to statewide office. I believe that is the distinction. It's just for state, the forms for state senator and state representative. So that's correct?
All right, yeah. So point of order from Councilor Bergman. Councilor Newbeezer, if you're just able to clarify, I will note that the first item listed on Civic Clerk at the very end of the file name and in capital letters amended. Can you clarify if that's the version that you are moving, Councilor Newbeezer?
Yes, moving the version with amended in the title.
Okay.
And that was my second
I was
to
about
that.
to ask you,
yes.
but I assumed
yes, I wanted to
that was the
make
case.
sure that,
Okay.
that we're all on the same page. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilor Barlow.
I'd like to call a recess, please.
Okay. I'll read that as a motion for a recess. Sometimes I just unilaterally say we're recessed, but let's just do this right. Attorney Ramakrishnan, do you know whether or not a motion for a recess requires a second?
Off the top of my head, I don't, but why don't we just take a second?
Let's do a second for good measure. Is there a second to that? Second by Councilor McKnight. How long?
5 minutes.
Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Council is in recess for 5 minutes, and we'll let folks on Town Meeting TV know when we're back. Thank you. Okay, great. Thank you for folks' patience. I do not have any other counselors in the queue at the moment. We'll go Councilor Barlow, and then Councilor. We'll give you the floor, Councilor Carpenter. Go ahead.
Sorry, point of clarification, and I think I'm going to direct this at Acting City Attorney. Just clarify, so we've been presented with a freestanding resolution, basically, to adopt a course of action. As I understand it, a freestanding resolution in and of itself has to be something, right? It has to either be an ordinance or a charter change. So could you just clarify how a freestanding ordinance, a freestanding resolution any resolution would get translated into something that adopts in our governance?
Yeah, and I think it's appropriate that the motion is actually to refer this to the ordinance committee because it is legislative, and so I think it would be appropriate that it eventually come out in the form of an ordinance. So I don't know if that fully answers.
Well, it does, and it was really for me connecting the dots of the proposal didn't attach it to either an ordinance or a charter change. And you can't just have a proposal, right? I mean, I'm just clarifying that.
It is legislative in nature, and so I think the motion on the floor is, now that the motion is
Okay.
that it go to ordinance, I think it's appropriate.
Thanks.
I will say, if I could just follow up with a clarifying question for you, Attorney Ramakrishnan, and I'd be open to feedback from the maker of the motion as well, that if it is sent to the ordinance committee, I do think that perhaps if there was proposed ordinance language to then come from this, then this would potentially come back in a different form than what's being sent to the committee right now.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. Okay.
But as a point of order, although we have a charter that says that the city follows the orders and I think whatever, there's another term. And so we actually can and have over the course of forever taken actions in the form of resolutions. We do this all the time. And so I mean, I totally support the referral.
Okay.
And, you know, all that, but I don't think that that is a prerequisite, and I don't think that it is a, it should be thought of as that is a condition for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bergman. You all set, Councilor Carpenter? All right, Councilor Barlow, we'll go back to you.
Thank you. I will not be supporting this resolution this evening, and I appreciate the spirit of the resolution and agree with Councilor Newbeeser for the need for high ethical standards among elected officials. I believe we already have those standards, and I believe we meet those standards on this council. It's been my experience during my 5 years on the council that councilors act with high ethical standards, routinely disclosing conflicts of interest and recusing themselves when they believe they have a conflict or an apparent conflict, even as recently this evening. Even as recently as this evening. We are also subject to rigorous state campaign finance reporting during election cycles and state ethics training. Burlingtonians who care to know can easily find out what we do in our lives outside the council and who our supporters are during our campaigns. None of my constituents have ever raised this or the aims of this resolution as an issue. And unlike state office holders, Burlington city councilors are essentially volunteers. We receive a very modest stipend. Most weeks that compensation is well below the minimum living wage we expect for others. And school board members receive no compensation for their service to the city. We ask a lot of those who are willing to serve in our roles already, and I believe additional scrutiny and the risk that information disclosed will get weaponized will make it harder for us to find experienced and qualified candidates to run for local office. I can say with some certainty that these financial disclosures, if available, would be used to attack candidates' financial interests and associations during campaign season, just as we have seen done with campaign finance reports. It's worth noting that the school board, who was not consulted in drafting of this resolution, has submitted a communication with similar concerns and is in opposition to this resolution. I'd be open into strengthening the conflict of interest rules if we wanted to do that in the future, but with the important caveat that I don't think we should spend a lot of time and energy on, or council action, on issues that don't address the immediate and pressing needs that we have in the city that need our attention and our constituents want us to be working on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Barlow. Are there other councilors that wish to be recognized on this matter? Councilor Grant?
Thank you. I support this because I think more transparency is important. I do feel that to refer to us as volunteers is a gross understatement of the positions and what we're responsible for doing and the fact that we have to go through elections. I do feel that a grave concern that the amount of money that is required for elections now, it keeps good people out of the process. And I think that we're not even asking for a full disclosure. So I guess I'll just leave it there. I just find the characterization that we're just volunteers to not be wholly accurate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Grant. Is there any other counselor? Yeah, well, Councilor Carpenter, do you have, sorry, I think your point before was sort of a point of clarification. Do you want the floor now? Okay, please go ahead.
Sorry. A couple of points. As you know from my posted amendment, I do support going it to a committee, and I'm fine with it going to ordinance. I do hope that the intent is to look some at the detail, you know, what is covered. President Travers clarified that an ordinance can come out the back end that looks much different, so I'm in good faith. I want to go in that way, and I think most importantly talk about this as disclosure and transparency. I think the term financial is a little maybe overrated. There are some things we need to disclose: where we work, boards we're on, where we get revenue. And so I'm not opposing any of that. I'm just saying let's talk about it as disclosure and not be so fixed on, you know, tax returns, which you're not getting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. Councilor Bergman.
I just want to say in response that I intend to have this on the next ordinance committee, which is in October, on October 21st, I think, or 20th. And I truly believe that we'll have a fair and full conversation. It'll include the policy, and we have a policy debate, and we have never shied away from that. And, you know, as you know, for me, I want to deal with the details. So, you know, the form itself, the authorization, all of that stuff. Lucky city attorney's office, once again, we'll have some questions in terms of our ability to do this, and we'll do that. That's my commitment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bergman. Councilor Schachter.
Thank you, President Travers. I want to say just a few things. I share Councilor Newbieser's goal of increasing transparency and closing any ethical loopholes that we may have. I want to be really clear that I think any assumption that any of us don't care about acting ethically or with transparency is misguided and harmful. And that narrative, I do not want that narrative to emerge from tonight's discussion or this vote, regardless of where it ultimately lands. And while I cannot speak for any of my colleagues, building public trust in local government is absolutely one of my top priorities, and I believe one of the most important responsibilities we hold as elected officials. At a time when faith in government is low nationwide, honesty, integrity, accountability, these must guide our work here in Burlington. And that said, I'm not totally sure I'm convinced that the resolution as it's been presented hits this mark. Over the past several days, I've spoken with many Vermonters who have served or considered serving in office, and every one of them has expressed concern that requiring candidates and their spouses, which is what the form has, to publicly disclose detailed financial information while running for local office here in Burlington would discourage participation in our local government. Serving in local office invites intense public scrutiny. I think so many of us have experienced that on a nearly probably daily basis. Finding people willing to step up to serve is hard, and I think it's a very legitimate concern that adding another barrier will make it harder. And as has been said, we have strong safeguards in place. All of our campaign contributions over $100 are publicly available on the Secretary of State's website, including any personal loans that candidates may make to self-fund their races. We also have a robust code of ethics, a conflict of interest policy, We require recusal when personal financial interests are at stake. If there are indeed any ethical loopholes that we should be addressing, I believe we need to begin by strengthening the existing policies that we have and promoting open discussion of potential conflicts. I fear that adding another form without truly understanding the problem we're trying to solve risks fueling personal attacks, and again, will have a chilling effect on people stepping forward to serve with little to no practical gain. So while the statewide financial disclosure form may make sense for state level and statewide positions that come with higher pay and broader influence, I think it's also true that it may not be well suited for the part-time local roles that we have here. I don't think we've done the due diligence to know if this form is necessary or what problem it seeks to solve. And so I want to be clear that I welcome collaboration with all of my council colleagues and the public on meaningful steps that we can take towards transparency and ethical governance. And just as importantly, on making local service more accessible for all Burlingtonians, which actually may be the opposite of what this could do. So I am not sure where I'm going to vote, but I will say, and I would welcome a response from Councilor Newbeezer, that I would probably only support the ordinance committee taking this up if the time will actually be taken to understand where there are existing gaps, if any, in our existing code of ethics before determining if some sort of disclosure form is warranted here in our community. This feels like how we do good policy, and I don't believe that that due diligence has yet been done. And also, I would definitely ask for more collaboration with the school board. So I think what I'm saying is I don't want us to go into the ordinance committee assuming that a form is what will have to emerge. I'd rather see us actually look at our existing policies and practices. Where are there loopholes? Where are there ethical concerns? And have emerged something that, if that's found, that it actually addresses what we need to be addressing here in our community.
Thank you, Councilor Schachter. We'll see if there's any other councilors that want to get in with a first round here, and then Councilor Newbeezer, I know some questions were asked of you there, so I anticipate if you want to respond, we'll certainly give you an opportunity to do so. Are there any councilors that wish to get in for the first time on this motion? Councilor Singh.
Thank you, President Travers. Councilor Schachter, that was very well said, and same with Councilor Barlow. I agree. I support Councilor Newbeezer's intent to create more transparency in government, and I appreciate that both Councilor Newbeezer and Councilor Grant brought up equity. I think that's a really important thing, and I want to say, I won't be supporting this resolution, and I do want to talk about equity, especially the people that have fought for so much equity in this city has been the school board. They are the ones that have advocated for more resources for our kids, for our marginalized communities, and they do that willingly and passionately for us in the State House and all over the state. You know, I do also appreciate, I had a great conversation with Councilor Newbeezer, and I feel for you, and he was picking up his infant from daycare. And I just want to give people out there a peek into our lives. We're part-time. He has a young family. I know, Jean, I'm looking over at you, and I know you spend a lot of time as a grandpa taking care of your grandchildren, and you're bouncing doing that. I've seen Councilor Grant have family members on committee meetings because somebody was sitting with you at a committee, or I don't know if it was the BIPOC meeting, somebody was sitting with you at a table. But we've all balancing our lives. We're all balancing our lives with everything we're doing here. I've been at a public meeting with President Travers, and his 4-year-old's crawling on him while he's speaking to the public. We're balancing a lot of things, and you're right, it is hard to access this. We do something that's really hard, and it takes, to your point of equity, it takes all people of all different backgrounds to be part of what we do here. And I agree with them. We need to find ways to provide more access and representation and equity in what we do here and get more people to represent in their voices here. I am more than willing to work with everybody at this table to make that happen. Let's have more voices here and not more certain constituencies represented. Let's work on that. Let's work on access, equity, and representation in local government. And I think that's what our focus should be, not necessarily a financial disclosure or as this resolution is trying to create transparency. I think what we're trying to get at is more voices at the table.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Is there any councillor that has not been recognized yet that would like to get in the queue on this item? Councillor Broderick.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I just wanted to I reiterate what some of my colleagues here have already stated, in that that yes, this is a resolution that we are referring to the ordinance committee, and that means that it needs to come out. It can't come out as a resolution. It's going to come out as an ordinance. So just by that fact, it's going to be quite different than what has been presented. I greatly appreciate Councillor Newbeezer for bringing this to the table. Not even because I 100% support it. I have my own questions and maybe rooms for improvement myself. But that's why I want to send it to the ordinance committee, as Councillor Carpenter requested, of how we use our time with this. It is to have a conversation about the topic. And that's why I think it's coming to us in the form of a resolution and not an ordinance, which in my opinion would be a strict, this is what you're going to work on, ordinance committee. This is a resolution. We can't just, it's just not that simple. I think this does invite that conversation, and if this does get sent to the ordinance committee, which I do support and encourage others to, I would hope that the ordinance committee would allow our voices to be heard in those conversations, and I would look forward to participating in them with you all. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Broderick. Again, before seeing if there's anyone else who would like to speak for a second time, is there anyone who has not been recognized that wishes to be recognized on this item? Okay. Councillor Newbeezer, I don't know if you want to respond to any of the items here. You have, I'll say, a minute or two left from your original time. So if you'd like to speak to it, happy to give you the floor, perhaps for our last word before we go to a vote.
I appreciate that, Council President. You know, I'll just say, and I'll just note that the form that I referenced, this what we asked state reps and state senators to submit on this form is sources of income. So what is your job? Are you actively lobbying for any organization? And then do you hold a significant stake in any company, or do you serve on any sort of board or anything like that? That's the extent of what we're talking about here. And I think that is reasonable. Actually, I disagree, but I understand that I don't think we'll have broad buy-in to requiring city council and the mayor to file tax returns as part of this. So maybe that's just not a political reality and a wish list item for me in the future. But that in and of itself is really basic. And I honestly, I've never met anybody walking around just in life who, you know, if I'm like, oh, what do you do for work? They're like, whoa, 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 don't get so personal. So I think that it's reasonable. I think, again, it's none of this or any of the language that I've used publicly when speaking about this in preparation for this meeting or tonight. I don't want that to be taken as implying any sort of nefarious intent to anybody. I think we all do a really hard thing. I really appreciated our conversation, Councillor Singh. And we have a slight disagreement here, like, you know, yes to representation, and I don't think it's mutually exclusive to something like this, but that's the beautiful thing. We can disagree and move on. So with that, I think I'll close. And yeah, I just want to reiterate one more time, and I'm probably running out of time here and looking at my notes.
And then we'll call it.
Yeah, I just want to hit home again that or just note quickly, sorry, that this is separate from campaign finance as well, which was partially referenced. This is sort of the other end of the pipeline, and we can talk more about it in ordinance committee. But I appreciate you all considering it, and hope to send this to ordinance. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Councilor Newbeezer. With no one else asking to be recognized, Councilor Grant, if we turn to you, I want to see, are there any other councilors that wanted to be recognized a second time on this item? All right, so Councilor Grant, we'll give you just a minute or so here, and then we'll go to Councilor Barlow for a minute, and then we'll go to a vote.
Thank you. This city struggles with equity, period. Could go on and on and on about that based on personal experience of my constituents. Equity is important, and we say it out loud, but what we actually do, that's something else. We really don't have a mechanism in place for the public or the media to really independently verify potential conflicts. And this isn't really adequate. And I think this forum asking a few things that are important, you can say that people can, it's easy for people to find out about it. Well, why not make it easier? Why not make it more transparent? And these things do matter during these times. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Grant. Councilor Barlow, and then we'll go to a vote.
Yeah, I just want to say two things that I've heard, both in public forum and during the debate here tonight. The first is that our conflict of interest that we declare here when we think we have them are quote-unquote self-reported. Well, so would be any financial disclosure that we make. So if someone, and I don't believe any of us would ever want to, but if someone wanted to hide something, you just wouldn't disclose it. So that's thing one, I guess. And thing two is, there's been a lot of conflation with campaign finances and the money in elections. All of that is very rigorously reported right now. So we would not be gaining anything in terms of more information about where money in campaigns was coming from. The only thing we would be gaining if we were to follow the state form is we know where people work, and most of us, have a single job. Most of that's on our campaign websites anyways when we run for office and we have bios about ourselves. And then you'd have whether or not, where other sources of income come from. And as I said to Councilor Newbeezer when we talked about this on Friday, it's like I could see, like, if someone has a rental property, then this would be weaponized to say they're a landlord, as though that was a pejorative thing to be. And so this is my concern about this. We have a lot of if
you could wrap up, Councilor Barlow.
Yes, high ethical standards on this council, as I've said already, and we already have campaign finance reporting. So I don't think this achieves, as it's laid out in the resolution, anything much additional. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Litwin, you had not been recognized the first time, and I saw you with your hand up, so
yeah,
we will give you an opportunity, and I'll give anyone else who was not recognized before an opportunity as well. Please go ahead.
Thank you kindly. I, have a lot of questions about this, too many questions, quite frankly, to be able to vote yes on this tonight. I think if we had sort of a runway of conversation, we could have easily reached a resolution that made, I think, sense. And to Councilor Schachter's point, I just think that we lost we got lost without any process. So much so that the school board chair had to come here tonight and write a letter because the school board was not even consulted in a resolution that directly impacts them. I'm unable to find any example in the state of Vermont that has done this. That's not to say we can't have a conversation about it, but no one else has done it. So I would be concerned about having a very robust conversation if we're going to be the first community to do it. And it even alarms me even more when the chair of ordinance committee says that they want to have the conversation, they'll agendize the conversation 11 days from now, which is quite rapid, and I don't understand what the urgency is. I have not known what the, I haven't seen any examples that would say that there's a sense of urgency. When I brought resolutions recently that went to ordinance, I put in deadlines that were far beyond that date, and I received quite negative feedback about putting those deadlines in, which I offered to remove, to be able to refer the parking ordinance and the gas station or transparency ordinance to the ordinance committee. Additionally, I don't know how this interacts with our charter, section 133. I don't know, I'm still speaking. And the deadlines and everything, it's just very strange to me why that needs to be so urgent. We do have, if we have an issue with the self-policing that's been brought up, then we should strengthen our language in these two documents. We can look at the charter, we can look at the code of ethics, and then have another conversation. But I just don't see how this document can get us to there right now. There have been issues I have seen issues of conflict of interest come up in this body, and I have to point out that and I don't think the form would actually even allow for the level of transparency for the public to necessarily know that. And I have to point out that the first resolution that was brought by Councilor Newbeezer, who has written this resolution, was to support the nurses union 4 weeks.
Point of order.
There's a point of order. Yes, Councilor Newbeezer.
I'm going to respectfully say that if you're about to make a point about my spouse, that you not do that and we not go there. Because I'll be happy to have that conversation. I had that conversation with every single one of you. My wife is a nurse. We are a proud union household. And do not mention my spouse again on this floor.
I'm not sure what the point of order was.
Oh, okay. I don't think it was a properly stated point of order, but Councilor Litwin, I'm going to ask you to please not engage in any sort of individualized or personal comments with respect to your colleagues here.
Well, I guess in the spirit of transparency, which is what we were talking about this evening, that's why I brought that up. So I'm happy to move along from that. But for me, it felt like a conflict of interest, and it was never disclosed. So I'll leave it there, but I would like us, if this is such an urgent matter and we need to have a conversation, then I don't think this is the way to do it. And I would have been happy to have more conversation leading into this rather than just be surprised with this, pretty rapid movement on this. And our school board needs to be able to consult. They need to be able to be involved. And the public needs to be able to be involved, and we need to be able to be involved. So we can't just rush this along either. So I will leave that at that.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Litwin. You did pose a question directly in response to a comment that Councilor Bergman had made in his role as chair of the ordinance committee. So, Councilor Bergman, I will provide you just a moment here to respond.
I actually haven't spoken about this at all.
Okay.
And I was not on the first round, not on the second round. I at least want to be able to have a fair shot, although all these comments of mine, with the exception of the entry, are going to relate to what I heard. And I was really hoping I wasn't going to have to speak about this. So I think I am within my rights to have a full and fair chance to be part of this deliberation. All I did was second the motion and make a point of order. So
I had you in the list. Excuse me, Councilor Bergman. If you haven't been recognized already, and previously I counted time as a point of order, a point of clarification here, what have you, I'm happy to provide you. We'll give you the last word here, Councilor Bergman, then I think we'll go to a vote. So please
thank
go
you.
ahead.
First of all, I want to echo what Councilor Carpenter said about this being disclosure. That's what the form is. In fact, the amended resolution speaks to a less confusing situation because it makes it clear that this is what, that the form relates just to legislators, be they House reps or senators, and not state officers. And that's a big deal in terms of this form. If anybody has looked at the form, it's a big deal, okay? But I just want to comment because maybe there's a lack of clarity. I'm going to try to be kind and open with this. When I said that we would look it up, take it up, I didn't say that we'd ram it out. In fact, despite my concerns about the parking lot and the gas station resolutions, we did take that up and act expeditiously on that. My work as the chair of your ordinance committee, I think, is beyond reproach when it comes to fairness and nonpartisanship. And so let me be absolutely clear. We don't have a deadline from this action tonight that would have me bring back and have me try to make that happen. If it happens, it happens. People talk about runways. There's not always runways that are given, and that's on both sides of the aisle. And in fact, the motion that we have here to refer is an appropriate place to have a runway because Lord knows a runway here at this body would take 50 minutes to an hour plus, and then you still refer it. So the action that we are taking is absolutely appropriate. And all the concerns that people have, and I have differences of opinion in terms of its appropriateness, because I do support this, are all things that we will have, I believe, a fair debate based on the people that show up and that we will try to encourage. And that includes the school board. That is actually the beauty of this. So we get a chance to say to ourselves and say to the public, we have these questions of transparency. We have these questions of conflicts of interest. We have these questions of good governance and how we want to make our government reflect a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And we're going to have an opportunity, if this passes, to do that. It is important for the people to know who is running for office and what interests they have and perhaps represent. It's just important to know. And sometimes we lay that out in our literature, and sometimes we don't. This gives an added opportunity for people to do that, and I hope that we will not kill that opportunity in the crib by killing it tonight, and I hope we will have the opportunity to discuss this and debate this in committee, and I ask you all to vote yes to allow us to have that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bergman. I think we will now go to a vote. Before going to a vote, I want to offer just some further clarification here, and Councilor Newbeezer, if you could please weigh in on this. Again, as we referenced earlier, there is a version of the resolution that's posted on Civic Clerk with the title of as amended. I do know that you had, during this debate, sent around an additional email that had been sent to the clerk earlier today with another resolved clause that referenced this item being referred to the Ordinance Committee. Just for the sake of clarity, my understanding is that the version that you've moved is just that's posted on Civic Clerk, and not the amendment that was circulated via email to the council with that additional resolved clause, correct?
Yes, it is just what is posted. I sent it around, but decided against moving an amendment.
Okay, and that's your understanding as well, Councilor Bergman, is the one who seconded the motion. All right, so the motion again is to refer the item to the Ordinance Committee. as I'm expecting a divided vote, and we do have a counselor online. Counselor Newbeezer, I feel you, as someone who always gets all the kid illnesses, whether it's hand, foot, and mouth, or roseola, or what have you. I feel you for that. But because we have a counselor online with an anticipated divided vote, we have to take a roll call. So the clerk will please call the roll on the motion.
Counselor Barlow?
No.
Counselor Bergman?
Yes.
Counselor Broderick?
Yes.
Counselor Carpenter?
Yes.
Counselor Grant?
Yes.
Counselor Kane?
Yes.
Counselor Litwin?
No.
Counselor McKnight?
No.
Counselor Newbeezer?
Yes.
Counselor Schachter?
Yes.
Counselor Singh?
No.
City Council President Travers?
Yes.
Eight ayes, 4 nays.
So with 8 ayes and 4 nays, the matter is referred to the Ordinance Committee. I will make a PSA on this because we've had some media reports out there recently when we have referred items to committee saying that these items have been passed. So allow this to be a public service announcement that the referral to the Ordinance Committee is not passing the matter. That it is just being sent to committee, and we will look forward to a report back from that committee in the weeks to come. That concludes our deliberative agenda, which now brings us to item 7, which is committee reports. Is there any counselor with a committee report? Counselor Bergman.
So we will do our best to take this up, but we do have I believe the parking lot and gas station matters are supposed to also come back to us with reports from the city attorney. So this is going to be a good and big meeting, and we are, I believe this would not be the first item of the 3 because it being in the queue. That's my anticipation for this, for whatever that is worth. But I think we work pretty effectively and efficiently. So I'm hoping and hopeful that we will get to this. I think that given the concerns that it is unlikely that it will get reported out. And I don't know if the others, what others will get reported out as well, but thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bergman. Is there another counselor with a committee report? Counselor Grant.
Thank you. I just want to do another reminder. The last Public Safety Committee meeting was on September 26, and I think that one of my concerns about the continued conversations about activity and incidents around City Hall Park made me want to give this reminder. I think that's a really important meeting to watch and to listen to the full conversation with Chief Burke and the data that was provided for the short period of time since the last community safety resolution was passed. I need members of our community to appreciate what we're all going through. I know there is a lot of exhaustion in our community right now, and there is the so-called quote-unquote compassion fatigue. There are a lot of people talking about enabling and permission, even though enabling and permission are not actually going on. It was a matter of whether or not enforcement was occurring, and enforcement is occurring now. We are looking at data in a very different way than was previously looked at, and I think that's very important. I think it's important to know that our interim police chief is looking at the individuals that are causing the highest number of incidents. I think it's important for him to be looking at the root causes of this. I think it's really important to know that 19 of these 20 are unhoused. And so it shows how we have to work on a variety of things in our city and in our state, and in fact in the country, because what's happening here is happening in other places. We've never relied upon the police department to solve the homeless crisis. But to be aware of how it's affecting individuals that are a drain on our resources is really important. I think the idea that with incidents reducing in the park, but increasing immediately outside of the park is important. And the fact that the activity is being pushed toward other neighbors is important. And it breaks my heart when people say that they don't care about that, because we do need to care about that. And the last thing I'll say, the mayor referenced earlier the online incident reporting. So I just want to make sure people understand that this is the new portal. We previously had online reporting. It did not work. That's a whole long story. There were things that reported there that will never be looked at. This is a new portal with very specific guidelines as to what can be reported through that portal. So we do encourage people to use that, and also encourage people to continue to enter information in the drug tip line. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Grant. We are still on committee reports. Is there any councilor with a committee report? All right, the next item was City Council General City Affairs. Is there any councilor that has additional General City Affairs comments? Okay. So then the last item is City Council President and Council updates. And I just want to take an opportunity to bookend this meeting with something the mayor started it with, which is gratitude for the departures from your office, Mayor. Deeply grateful for the work of Ingrid Jonas, Sarah Russell, and Joe McGee. I think Sarah Russell in particular, there's a whole lot of people in this community who very well may owe their lives to the work of Sarah Russell and others within your office, and I'm grateful that she will hopefully continue her mission here for Burlington and for the community. And also want to extend my gratitude to Joe McGee. I had the privilege of serving with Joe when he was on the council. I'm not going to say we have very different ways of looking at the world, but we have some different ways of looking at the world. But what I appreciated about Joe is his willingness to approach every issue with openness and with humility and a sense of humor. And always felt that he approached every issue with integrity and a lot of smarts, both when he served on the council as well as in your office, Mayor. And I think all three of these individuals will be very missed, and wanted to extend my gratitude on behalf of the council for their work in your office too. So thank you for that. With no other business before the council, absent objection, I will declare the meeting adjourned at 9:28 p.m. Thank you, Town Meeting TV, for your work tonight. Good night.